Hello everyone. I am the Midnight Narrator and I am here today to help you. I know you are using this video to fall asleep, so before we begin, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching this. Now get comfortable and relax. Have you ever been driving on a long stretch of road? Who am I kidding? Of course you have. If you're from the Midwest, you know that it's always better to drive for 10 hours than to fly for 3 hours. Well, since we both know you have you ever been in the middle of nowhere and seen a sign that says mystery spot only 10 miles before? If you have, and you had a family like mine, then you've been to places like that. A rundown tourist trap full of monkey torsos sewn to fishtails, jackalope mounts, and rooms built to look level but are actually on an incline. These hokey horror houses were my bread and butter growing up. Every year my mom, dad, and I would stop in for a couple hours of middle-class fun. I could never figure out how they managed to get a ball to roll uphill, or why their mermaid wasn't on the news. Now I know that everything in those places were fakes and illusions, but when you're a kid, you vow to get to the bottom of these mysterious marvels. Now that I'm a 24-year-old man, I found true horrors, and now I wish I hadn't. It all started when my favorite mystery spot went on the market. I went to the bank, got myself a predatory small business loan, and bought the place. The predatory nature of the loan didn't bother me. I was going to make millions. It was set back about a quarter mile from the road. The place was collapsing on its own weight. That wasn't what I was there for. I was bound and determined to be the first person to capture the Michigan dog man, dead or alive. Was it a werewolf? Was it a creature forgotten by Mother Nature? I didn't know. This creature has haunted me since I was in high school. I'll never forget the night my nightmares became my waking life. In November 2017, I was a 17-year-old football player. If you're from the north, you know just how dark it gets by 5 p.m. So at 7 p.m., it was dark. My dad had dropped me off at practice that afternoon, so my coach gave me and a few other teammates a ride home that night. We stayed late that night to strategize for the semifinals, so we left at around 7 p.m. Coach loaded 5 of us into his minivan and we shoved off. Shane was the first person to be dropped off because he lived in town. Then it was Devin. Then it was Bryson. Once it was down to Wayne and I, we started to drive down some back roads. We both lived off the beaten trail. Wayne lived close to the border of Hiawatha National Forest on a windy dirt road. Wayne and I were getting pretty rowdy in the back, talking about how we were going to dominate in the semifinals. Coach, as a joke, kicked Wayne out of the van. Coach, all right, you got to walk back from here. As a willing participant, Wayne threw up his hands and got out of the car. The plan was that Coach was going to drive around the bend, turn around, and pick him back up. Coach and I were laughing as we drove away. Then we turned around. As we were driving back to Wayne, we saw in the headlights that he was hauling tail back towards us. The look in his eyes was of pure terror. I threw open the van door. Wayne, drive! Coach spun the van around and hit the gas. That was when the entire van started to shake. Wayne was screaming and crying, and Coach was using some very colorful language. I turned around and looked out of the back window. I saw glowing cherry red eyes. It looked straight into me, and I swear I heard it sat Brent. Did it know my name? Once it finally let us go and we got back to Wayne's house, we all got out, and that was when we noticed Wayne's leg. There was a huge bite that was leaking like a sieve. There was a matching bite mark on the rear bumper. Needless to say, Coach lost his job. He was ticketed for $1,000 and sentenced to 1 month in jail. Everyone knew Coach and knew that he wasn't being malicious, but the law was the law. The judge gave him the lower end of the sentencing, or else he would have been disbarred. Coach is still friends with Wayne's family all these years later. About a month after the initial incident, Wayne went missing. Unfortunately, that wasn't uncommon. Older teens and young adults constantly ditch this town. They hop on the freight train and try to make their way to Detroit. This was different. Wayne was my best friend. He never mentioned to me that he had any big city dreams. It was quite the opposite. He never planned on leaving. He loved this town. No one listened, but I know it had something to do with the dog man. And I dedicated the rest of my life to finding it. And Wayne's parents assumed he was another victim of drug abuse. In our small town, you had 3 options. First, get a job at the paper factory and never leave. 2, skip town and look for a better life in a bigger place. 3, choose a substance and abuse the crap out of it. Unfortunately, option 3 was the most common in our town. Heroin and alcohol practically flowed through town like a river. Every year someone would be found dead at the bottom of the dam just outside of town. If they managed to not die, they'd return to their families crying and begging, "Please forgive me," not knowing just how much they'd killed their families, how much this destroyed them. This is what Wayne's family thought happened to him. I believed something else. Unfortunately, I was the one who spiraled into the sinkhole that is substance abuse. After I lost my best friend, I tried everything: shrooms, LSD, cocaine, and heroin. It was during one of my binges that the idea struck me to buy the mystery spot. I had a vision of myself triumphantly displaying the beast that destroyed my life. My drug-fueled brain began to concoct the plan to capture the Michigan Dogman. The whole reason I bought the mystery spot was to show the world the true horrors that lurk in the forest, not these P.T. Barnum-style scams. I was hell-bent on capturing the cursed Michigan Dogman that took my friend from me all those years ago. I had become obsessed with the idea that I could overpower it and put it on display for all the world to see. I'd studied the Michigan Dogman, and from my studies there were 3 possibilities as to what this beast was. 1, a creature that has evolved alongside us, possibly an undiscovered subspecies of wolf. 2, a genetic marvel where somehow a bear and a wolf, probably in a lab, were crossed. This theory would explain why the prints left behind share characteristics of wolves and bears. 3, as unlikely as it may be, it could be a victim of lycanthropy. I prepared myself for all of these possibilities. I'd built an enclosure that was fit for a Kodiak bear. It was based on the Kodiak pen at the Toledo Zoo in Ohio. And inside I had a silver chain. Making the silver chain was no small feat. Months of finding silver dollars, thrifting actual silverware, and buying damaged jewelry. I bought a forge and as many crucibles as it took. This creature was going to make me millions from ticket sales, and inevitably when the government decides to pay me to study the beast. I was certain that I had made a foolproof trap. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a cold night in February. The moon was full, and I was at the last place I saw the Michigan Dogman. I was armed with a rifle loaded with elephant tranquilizer, and I was walking down Wayne's old road. The moon was full and bright. The stars paled in the brilliance of the silver glow. With the snow in the woods and on the road, I had no problem seeing. Tied to the back of my belt, on a 15-foot length of rope, was a sack full of deer entrails. I was dragging it behind me the same way a bass fisherman trolls a lake with a plow jockey. I heard wolves howling in the distance. They knew where I was, but I hadn't gone there for them. I was after the bigger fish. I was so consumed with my hatred for the beast, overwhelmed with my desire for revenge, blinded by my pride and love of money. I was going to win. Then I heard it. A cross between a bear's growl and a wolf's howl. I felt a tug on my rope and I stopped. My heart pounded, not with fear but with anticipation, a craving that I can only compare to the craving for another hit of tar. I turned and saw the dogman holding the sack in his paw. Although his expert 6 was hard to read, I felt as though he were smiling at me. I smiled back, euphoria sinking into my bones. The world slowed down. I felt higher than a kite. Me. You're coming home with me. Then it spoke. Dogman. I'm not going anywhere with you, Brent. There went the naturalistic explanation. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Brent, you idiot, why are you doing this? And I would answer back to you, why do you drink when even one damages your liver? Why do you smoke when you know it'll damage your lungs? Why do you smoke weed when you know it damages your brain? It's because you think you're special, that you're the exception to the rule. I wasn't. You're not either. I laughed as I raised my gun. I pulled the trigger and the tranquilizer dart slammed into him with a shunk. The beast took a step forward. I fired again. Shunk! 2 more steps. I fired some more. Shunk! 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 The dogman faltered. He took a knee. He got back up. I unloaded. Shunk! 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 Although he was knocked out, I was extra careful. I put a silver muzzle on his mouth, silver shackles on his arms and legs, and chained him to the nearest tree. I walked back to my truck, drive back to him, and used my winch to get him in the bed of my truck. The next day, after I'd caged him, I called my family, Coach, and Wayne's family to come see. I thought that if this was a werewolf, he'd turn back into a human. But I guess over the centuries, details had been changed. Apparently, the wolf form was a permanent change. When they all arrived, I brought them to the enclosure that I had dramatically curtained. Me. After all these years, I found him. The one who destroyed our lives. The one who took Wayne from us. With a flourish, I tore the veil from the cage and they beheld the Michigan Dogman. The look of horror when they laid eyes on the monster filled me with jubilation. That was only interrupted when I heard Wayne's mom, Jen, speak. "Jen? Wayne?" I spun around and there he was. Wayne, he was entirely naked. He was chained and bleeding. He was crying. I immediately swung the gate open and unbound him. Me, "Wayne, are you okay?" Before I could hug him and get him a blanket to cover up, he began to laugh. His skin sprouted fur, his bones began to snap and crack as he stretched into a horrible shape. The skin around his mouth tore as it elongated into a snout. He grabbed me by my throat and flung me into the cage. My head slammed into the wall and everything went black. When I awoke, I saw a bite torn into my thigh. I then looked out of the bars and saw the mess. My family's, Coach's, and Wayne's family's bodies were twisted and gored. Their entrails were woven into a grotesque message. I vomited as I beheld the scene. I stood back up and read the bloody message. "Please forgive me." Sarah first noticed it on a Tuesday morning, a small, hard bump just below her ribcage. She pressed against it in the shower, wincing at its tenderness. Probably just a bruise, she thought, though she couldn't remember bumping into anything. By Thursday, the bump had grown to the size of a golf ball. The skin around it had taken on a faint bluish tint, like the color of veins beneath pale flesh. When she pressed it now, she could have sworn she felt something shift beneath her fingers. That night, she lay in bed, unable to sleep, her hand resting on the protrusion. In the stillness of her bedroom, she felt it pulse, not with her heartbeat. This was different, arrhythmic, like something testing its boundaries. The doctor's office couldn't see her until Monday. "If it's an emergency, go to urgent care," the receptionist had said with practiced indifference. But how could Sarah explain that this felt different, that when she pressed the spot now, she could feel something press back? By Saturday, she couldn't button her jeans. The growth had expanded, stretching across her abdomen in branching patterns that reminded her of frost on a window. In the mirror, she could see them spreading beneath her skin, delicate crystalline structures that caught the light when she moved. That night, she woke to a scratching sensation inside her body. Stumbling to the bathroom, she flicked on the harsh fluorescent light. The branching patterns had spread up her ribcage and down past her hips, glowing faintly in the darkness when she turned off the light. She pressed her hand against the largest concentration of growth and felt something shift, not fluid but solid, geometric, alive. Sunday morning, she couldn't get out of bed. The weight in her midsection had become unbearable. The branches had spread down her thighs and up her neck, their crystalline structures visible now even without light. When she managed to roll onto her side, she could hear them clink together inside her, like wind chimes made of glass and bone. In her delirium, she remembered the meteor shower last week, how she'd stood in her backyard watching the streaks of light arc across the sky, how one had seemed to come down so close, its light casting strange shadows across her yard, how the air had smelled like ozone and something else, something sweet and metallic. She tried to reach for her phone, but her arms had become too heavy, too rigid. The branches were everywhere now, transforming her from the inside out. In the mirror on her bedroom wall, she could see herself changing, becoming something geometric, crystalline, beautiful in a terrible way. As consciousness faded, Sarah watched her hand stretch toward the ceiling, fingers elongating into delicate crystal spires that caught the morning light and scattered it across her walls in rainbow patterns. Her last human thought was that she should have been more careful what she wished upon those stars. They found her 3 days later when she missed too much work. The police report described a peculiar crystalline structure in the approximate shape of a human body. The case remains unsolved, though locals say that on clear nights, they can see strange lights in Sarah's backyard, like pieces of stars that fell to earth waiting for someone else to wish upon them. I moved to North Dakota one year for work, ended up staying 3. I'm from Montana. I would drive back to Montana on my days off every couple weeks. I would get off super late and mostly would drive at nighttime. A large portion of the 3.5 hours drive are winding 2-lane road through pretty uninhabited land. I would see maybe 2 other cars. There was this specific stretch of narrow highway where there wasn't even any houses way off in the distance. The first incident I had was when I was driving back to North Dakota. It was always so very dark, darker than I ever remember any normal night being, and just for context, I'm open-minded about things, but don't just believe everything I hear. Up until this point, I've never really been convinced of anything supernatural or paranormal or demonic. I've had some weird encounters throughout my life, but nothing like the series of events that followed this first night. South. As I was driving along minding my own business heading back to North Dakota, I hit Highway 16. It's the halfway mark. There is a river next to the road. You follow it a short while. This occurred during the time when I'm driving alongside it. I notice movement out of my peripherals and look to the right where the river is. It's very dark out, but I can see the silver shimmer of the water. Only this time, hovering in the middle of the water is a super deep, thick fog. It's moving, rolling towards the road. Okay, I guess that's normal enough, but this wasn't. It wasn't like a haze from moisture low-hanging. This looked like a single, huge, thick cloud, a very isolated mass. I could see where it began and where it ended, like it had a shape and was specific to one area. And it moved as a whole. By this time, I'm thinking, WTF, and am I seeing stuff? So I slow down a little to try to get a better look because it's so dark and the moonlight is the only thing giving it any illumination. My eyes are fixed on it, and I'm not paying attention to the road in front of me. I'm almost to a hill where you round a corner and move away from the river and lose sight of the area I was looking at. I can see the sign warning you to slow down for the corner, reflecting off my headlights, and I look forward to get ready to navigate the turn. I slam on my brakes at 65 miles per hour. Hard. There's a massive, hazy, gray-white object in the middle of the road. I literally skid to a stop in the middle of this highway. I can't even explain the shape of what it was. It looked like a cloud, but it was tall, but all the details and edges were round. It was whatever was just on the river, the fog, whatever the heck it was. It was in front of me. I could see darkness around the edges of it, so I knew it wasn't just a normal fog that would encompass more than a single spot on the road. I thought I was going to have a panic attack. I just couldn't wrap my mind around what it was I was looking at. I tried to focus on it so I could rationalize whatever it was and why it looked like it did, and how it had moved directly in front of me. I sat there dumbfounded and terrified. I blinked, and it was just gone. That was just the start of things. The next time something happened, I was driving back to Montana, so opposite direction this time. I'm driving along listening to music, and I'm about to hit that same stretch of highway. I drive pretty fast, and I have made this drive so many times I could probably do it with my eyes closed. There's never any other cars, there are animals to look out for, but I'm a professional anyways. I'm coming to that corner I mentioned, and the moment I round the bend, I see the back of what looks like a person. A man. He has a really large walking stick, and he's on the shoulder of the road. His back looks to be hunched over like someone older. My headlights land on his back, and it looks like he's wearing a brown kind of cloak made of hide or animal leather of some kind. I'm going way too fast for this road in general, but now I see a human, so I slow way down so I can veer over and give him more space. It's like 3:30 a.m. I'm thinking it's so weird that there's a person walking on the highway this late. Not to mention we were between two towns where the closest one was about 40 miles away, and there's 0 houses anywhere close. The profoundness of that thought didn't immediately cross my mind, but I obviously knew how strange it was to see someone walking, alone in the dark. I'm going about 30 now to pass by him, and as I do, he turns to look at me, and all I see in his face are 2 dark red eyes. I couldn't make out any features, nothing. I couldn't see a hand holding his walking stick or any anatomy. All I could see were his eyes. I convinced myself that I imagined that, and it was too dark and I was going too fast to have actually seen what I know I saw. I tried to shake it off, but it was already burned into my brain. 10 miles later, an animal, I can only describe as a dog-like creature, but it was on 2 hind legs, who coincidentally had the same hunched posture, crosses the road in front of me. It stops for just a split second long enough for me to focus on it, and it turns to make eye contact with me. We're looking at each other. I'm startled to see the very same deep red eyes. My heart drops. I'm getting ready to slam on my brakes so I don't hit this thing. I close my eyes for a split second, and when I open them, it is nowhere to be seen. I'm in full-blown panic mode. I make sure my doors are locked, all my windows are completely up. I turn my brights on and my light bar, and I drive as fast as freaking possible to get to the next town so I can be on the interstate. I don't know what it was I saw. I'm still questioning if any of it was real or if my eyes or brain were playing tricks on me. But the next time it came up, might have convinced me. The third time, it was so dark. I was driving back to Montana and my tire pressure light comes on, starts blinking, dinging. I'm like, shoot, I got a flat. Guess where I am? Right next to the river. I'm trying my best to not be a wimp. I forgot to mention, this whole stretch of highway, there's no cell service. It's like a dead zone. So I pull off to the side of the road. I know how to change my own tire. I'm very capable, and I have every intention of doing it. But it's very dark and there's nothing around me. I sit there for a moment and try to see if maybe by the grace of God I have service and can call my insurance or AAA. Because let's face it, I'm 5'4", 110 pounds in the middle of nowhere in the pitch black night at like 2:30 a.m. I was afraid. I was scared to get out of my car and even look. So I grabbed a flashlight and rolled down my window, stuck myself halfway out and shined my light at my back and front tires, because I could feel the direction my car had been pulling. I shine it at the front and it looks fine. Shine it at the back. It's flat. As I'm cursing at my luck, I see a shadow. A tall, thick, human-like shadow. It's quite a ways behind my car, running towards me. I drop the flashlight and I assume it breaks because it turns off. I freeze. It's silent, dead silent. Except I can hear feet hitting pavement, it's so fast. I couldn't move. I swear I stared in the direction of the noise into the darkness for a solid minute, until my brain finally starts working again and tells my body to move. I scramble back in the window, hit the lock button and roll up my window. My headlights are still on so I can see in front of me and my taillights are the only light behind me. But there's no moon and it's pitch black around me. I sit there for what seems like an eternity, peering into the darkness, straining to try to see anything. I couldn't see a thing. I decided to turn my car off and crack my window to see if I could hear anything. Worst decision ever. I cracked my window, and I could hear, breathing. This was almost wet, heavy breathing, and it sounded like it wasn't but inches away from me. Like whatever it was had reached me, and they were crouching under my window. I rolled up my window in terror and went to start my car. And guess what? It wouldn't start. This car has never one time ever not started, ever. I literally felt such dread I was almost convinced I was going to die there. I'm crying and trying over and over to start the car, and it's not even trying. I swear I see fog from breath on my passenger window and just trying to not look to my left and boom, it starts. I drove 30 miles on a completely flat tire, destroyed my rim and threw off the entire alignment on my car permanently. There was no freaking way I was getting out of that car to change that tire. Here is a kicker. I have a friend who lived in the same place in North Dakota for work a few years prior to me moving. He was also from Montana and had made the same drive a million times like I had. One night we were talking about commuting back and forth, and I had brought up Highway 16 and how I hated that portion of the drive. Before I can even tell him a vague why, he tells me, I've seen some things on that highway. I don't know what the hell it was and I can't really explain it and don't care to, but there's something wrong with that area. At this point, I'm feeling that same ominous feeling because I'm terrified but relieved that I wasn't the only one who experienced something weird. He asked me what it was that perturbed me so much about the area, so told him my story. I felt like he would understand since he and I had the same kind lifestyle at the time with work and going home, so I told him all of it. He sat there silent until I finished. The look on his face made it seem like his world just ended. Not saying a word, he stood up and walked out of the room. I got up and followed him. I kept asking him what was wrong, but he didn't respond. We're outside, and he goes out to his pickup. He doesn't start it. He digs through his glove box and pulls out this notebook. Mind you, this was the first time I said anything about my experiences or that I ever had any. I was too confused, scared, and embarrassed to tell anyone about it. No one knew anything. I didn't want to give whatever it was power by talking about it or letting it keep infecting my mind and my thoughts. So he comes back in. He hands me the notebook and flips through a few pages while I'm holding it. He gets to a certain page and tells me to read it. I start reading. Someone explained to me why my friend, who used to make the same drive at night, is writing about a demonic old man walking on the shoulder of the road, who, 10 miles down, changed into something completely different. He described it as a big black shadow dog, but he knew it was the man because it had the same red eyes. He has this written down, in a notebook, from 2 years prior. I'm crying. I'm literally sobbing. There's no possible way that what I was reading and what he had just heard me tell him could have been collaborated. How could I even act like none of it was real? Whatever it was, whatever that thing is, has to be real. How could the same thing have happened to both of us? I'm still not sure how I ended up in this situation. I remember dropping the kids off at school and going for my usual run. We have recently moved to this small town and am still learning our way around. I had taken a turn I usually do not and had gotten somewhat lost. I ended up on a cul-de-sac. There was a huge old two-story craftsman-style house at the end. It was the only house on the street. It was bluish with a huge wrap-around porch. Seated at the top of the hill, it cast an imposing shadow. As I turned to go back, it happened. Not sure what, mind you. I woke up with an intense headache. It was pitch black. The first thing I noticed was my feet were on a concrete floor and it was freezing cold. Wait, what happened to my shoes? Why can't I lift my legs? Oh no, I am strapped down to a chair. My legs and arms are each strapped separately to the chair arms and legs. There are other straps around my torso. I can't move. The chair is large and wooden. Strangely comfortable, my heart rate quickens, and I am filled with terror at my predicament. I decide not to scream as to not alert whomever brought me here that I am awake. Quickly, I try to work to free myself. I only succeed in making the bonds tighter. Stay calm, I tell myself. Panicking isn't going to help. There is no sound nor light in the room. I assume due to the coldness in the room that I'm underground. I have no idea how long I sat there, contemplating my situation, thinking about my kids. Oh no, my daughter has her spelling bee at school today. She was looking forward to me being there. She has been studying so hard. She is super smart. I'm alone in the dark, in a chair that has become my prison. The silence is broken by the sudden appearance of footsteps. My throat tightens and my fists clench. I feel my heart pounding about to leap from my chest. Thud, thud. They are getting closer. I become aware of a large wooden door across from me. The door starts to creak. It slowly opens, a light pours in. Before me is an imposing figure. Maybe 6'7", 300 pounds easy. White hair, a white beard. Dark black eyes. No, they were not brown, deep black, piercing. As if he wasn't just looking at me, he was looking through me. Huge hands and huge feet. He seemed to stare at me for what felt like an eternity. "Welcome," he snarled. Okay. I tried to sound confident and not afraid. "Who are you and why have you brought me here?" "That isn't of your concern right now. You will find out soon enough," he snarled. "You will speak only when spoken to," he continued. "We will have a long chat after lunch." "Lunch? I want your stay here to be," he paused, "comfortable." Great, I get a psycho that has jokes. "Well, can I have a blanket? I'm freezing." "I must go upstairs and check on lunch. It should be about ready. Today we are having lasagna." "I will return soon with your meal." I am thoroughly confused at this point, wondering what is about to happen. Soon the large wooden door closed and I returned to the darkness of my chair prison. It wasn't long until he returned. He freed part of my arm so I could somewhat feed myself. His hand, when it brushed against mine, wasn't just cold. It was freezing. A freezing I cannot explain. I have never felt anything that cold. The lasagna was well amazing. Yes, I ate. I figured I wasn't escaping, so if it was poisoned, it would likely be better than what was next. He laughed. "You have 3 children, correct?" My blood ran cold. "Yes." How did he know? "Your daughter has a spelling bee today?" What the? How could he know that? "You leave my children alone," I shouted. "I do not hurt children," he said, somewhat unconvincingly. "They will miss me. They need me." "They will not even know you are gone," he deadpanned. Now what the hell did he mean by that? What is his plan? "You are in the basement of this house." Suddenly I noticed the room. Maybe 5 by 8. Walls made of what appeared to be cinder blocks. "Do not waste your breath screaming. No one will hear you and no one else is in this house." "Okay, I am in the basement of a house. Must be that huge house. I guess I didn't go far." He strapped my other arm back down. That cold, clammy hand holding my arm down while strapping. It was worse than the restraint. "Do not bother trying to escape. The restraints are too thick." It is a waste of energy, so I noticed. "What will it take for you to let me go?" I attempted to bargain. He just laughed and turned and left me. The large wooden door slammed shut. It locked. Why lock the door if I can't get up? I wondered. Alone in the dark. In my chair that has become my prison. I attempt to work on the bonds on my arms. No good. Maybe I can get my feet free. Well, that only served to make the straps on my arms tighter. Guess it is all connected. I had to remain calm, and my only plan is to reason with the giant. It seemed to be my only hope. I am still in shock over what has happened. Why me? Why bother feeding me an amazing lunch? The chair is a massive wooden chair, with large wooden armrests, 4 large legs. My feet can reach the floor. My back is flat against the back of the chair. My feet are freezing. Why couldn't he give me a blanket? I have tried to rock the chair, but it appears to be secured to the floor. I don't know how I can escape. The straps are cutting into my wrists and ankles. I don't know what to do. For some weird reason, the chair is giving me a feeling of comfort and safety. I don't know why. I am alone in the dark, in a chair that has become my prison. Suddenly, I start to drift off. Where am I now? My daughter's classroom. They are having the spelling bee. The calendar on the wall shows today's date. How? What the? There is a woman standing in the room that I do not recognize. I thought I knew most of the parents, but we are new here, so who knows? She is slender, long black hair, and a long black dress. No one seems to notice me there. Suddenly, this woman turns and smiles. She can see me. Who is she? Suddenly, the scene disappears. It is replaced by a teen, apparently at a school dance or something. I don't recognize her. She is thin-built but fairly tall. Standing next to her is that same woman who turns around and stares straight at me and smiles. What is happening? How does she see me? What was in that lasagna? Suddenly I am back, still alone in the dark in a chair that has become my prison. I'm not sure how long I was in that chair. I just know the giant, as I affectionately called him, brought me 3 more meals of lasagna. Each time I would drift off afterwards and dream. Each time in my dream, that same woman in a black dress would be in there and she would smile at me. One time I saw my son's upcoming baseball tournament and she was there. I began to look forward to seeing her friendly face, as odd as that may sound. He hadn't spoken to me much. I tried to bargain with him to try to see if I could get him to set me free. No good. He just stared blankly at me. I tried to ask him questions about his past and where he came from, but got nowhere. I still tried to free myself, but just couldn't. The straps were too thick and strong. The chair, you would think it would start to really hurt, but it didn't. It was strangely comfortable. Here he comes again. Thud, thud, thud. He has huge feet. Well, all of him is huge. Greetings, he said. I said, hello. Today after lunch, he said almost gleefully, you will find out why you are here. Suddenly my heart started to race again. The fear crept in all over again. I have to escape somehow. I wasn't sure that I wanted to know what was next, but before I could ask, he left and shut the door again. The sound of the door locking this time seemed louder and more ominous than before. I was again alone in the dark, in the chair that had become my prison. The silence is broken by a new set of footsteps, much lighter. Has he brought friends? What is about to happen to me? The door slowly opens. Light floods the room. In steps a female figure. As my eyes adjust to the light, it is that same long black-haired woman from my dream. Quickly, I'm going to set you free. You must hurry up those stairs and straight out the front door before he returns. What is your name? She said, there is no time for that. Now go. We have to get out of here. Freedom. I find my shoes, quickly put them on. Hurry. Go. I step out into the hall and am hit by the smell of dust and stale air. I find the stairs. Wow, that is a tall staircase. I hurry to the top. Suddenly I realize I am alone. I call back down to her and there is no response. I guess I am in the living room. It is dark and cold. Dust covers everything. Looks like no one has been there in years. What the? I hear a car pull up. Fearing that is the giant, I creep towards the window. It is a police car, followed by another squad car. In steps a large police officer who looked like he had been on the force for a while, followed by a young man that looked like he just finished high school and 2 other young officers. We received a report of a disturbance in this abandoned house. I explained. It wasn't abandoned, and explained the situation. And there was a woman downstairs that may need help. The younger officer ran down the stairs and came back and said there was only 3 rooms, the chair, and no one. He noted there were no exits down there. The other officers checked upstairs and throughout the house, and there was no sign anyone had been there. The only footprints in the dust were the ones we had made. How is that possible? The sergeant explained, this house has been vacant for years. I told him about the food. We went into the kitchen and it was empty. No fridge, no oven, just some old broken empty cabinets. My blood ran cold. The officer asked to describe my captor. When I described them, he showed me a picture on his phone of a large man and another of a slender woman. Yes, that is them. What is happening? I ate food, though. Wait, I hadn't eaten a bathroom in days. What happened? About 10 years ago, the sergeant began. This stranger from New York came to town. He had been a chef at an Italian restaurant. He seemed nice, but had a dark side. He kidnapped a mom and 17-year-old daughter. That woman in the picture? Yes, they were held down there for days. The daughter was strapped to that chair you were strapped to in that middle room. The mom freed herself, went looking for her daughter. She found her and the chef towering over her. She hit him on the head with a cinder block she found. She freed her and sent her upstairs. Unfortunately, the man came to and chased Mom up the stairs. They struggled and fell down the stairs to their deaths. The girl escaped? Yes, she is fine and is married with 3 kids and works as forensic investigator. You know her well, as relief is replaced by sadness. She is my daughter, the sergeant said. At this point, the younger officer's eyes were the size of dinner plates. I'm so sorry about your wife. So I was held captive by a ghost? Yes, apparently so. We have been trying to get the family to sell this place. You see, every year we have to come around this time to this house. She has rescued several people. Wow, let's get out of here. What day and time is it? I was stunned when he told me that it was right before I had been captured. Somehow, I still had time to make the spelling bee. I had never been so glad to see my family. They were confused as to why I was so emotional. Anyways, so 3 months later, this house went on the market. We bought and restored it. I guess it has been about a year since that happened. It is amazing, isn't it? We turned the basement into a game room play area. The kids love it. Yes, this is the house. Oh, the chair. I brought it up and had it refinished. You are sitting in it now. Isn't it beautiful? My favorite spot to sit in and watch TV. What's the matter? Leaving so soon? What is wrong? Dinner is almost ready. It is lasagna. It started with a strange email. The subject line read, "We heard you." Now listen, I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but the body of the email stopped me cold. You're not alone in your apartment. She's been watching since 2:42 a.m. Listen closely tonight or she'll make herself known. I laughed it off as some prank. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. My apartment is on the 3rd floor with no fire escape, and I live alone. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every groan of the old building made my skin crawl. At 2:40 a.m. I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, waiting. At exactly 2:42 a.m. my Bluetooth speaker powered on. I hadn't touched it. Connected to Echo. My breath caught. I don't own any device named Echo. Static crackled and then a faint voice whispered, "She's here." The air grew cold. I swear I could feel someone standing behind me. I didn't dare turn around. The speaker crackled again. "She's waiting, ask her." I forced out a shaky, "Ask what?" The voice answered louder now. "Ask what she took." I couldn't stop myself. "What did you take?" The static exploded into a shrill, piercing scream. My ears rang as a shadow darted across the room, too fast to be human. When I turned on the lights, my apartment looked wrong. Everything was where it should be, but it all felt slightly off. The air was heavy, suffocating. Then I noticed the clock. The digital display read 2:42 a.m. It hadn't changed. Panicking, I grabbed my phone to call for help. My screen was filled with text messages from an unknown number. Every message was a timestamp, 2:42 a.m., 2:42 a.m., 2:42 a.m. The last message said, "She's taken your time." I don't know how long I've been here now. The clocks still read 2:42 a.m. The world outside my window moves in slow, distorted waves. I can't leave, I can't sleep. But I can hear her breathing. If anyone finds this, please listen to the hum of your electronics. If it's silent, you're safe. If it whispers, she's already there. When I was a kid, Christmas Eve was pure magic. I'd lie awake listening for reindeer hooves or the soft rustle of Santa squeezing down the chimney. My parents played along perfectly, leaving half-eaten cookies and handwritten notes from Santa. Even when I figured out the truth, I never lost my love for the holiday. It became my turn to create the magic for my own kids. This year, though, Christmas wasn't what I expected. Something happened that I can't explain, something that changed the way I see Christmas forever. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe in my home again. It started as a perfectly normal Christmas Eve. Jack, my 6-year-old, and Emma, who's 4, were beside themselves with excitement. They helped me leave out milk and cookies for Santa before Eric, my husband, and I tucked them into bed. Jack begged to stay up late and catch Santa in the act, but eventually, they both fell asleep. By 11 p.m., Eric and I were in the living room arranging gifts under the tree and filling stockings. We laughed as we drank hot cocoa, proud of the magic we'd made. It was the kind of night you see in Christmas commercials, warm, peaceful, full of love. At midnight, Eric yawned and headed upstairs. I decided to stay up a little longer, enjoying the glow of the Christmas tree. That's when I heard it. A deep, muffled thud came from above me. At first, I thought it was snow sliding off the roof. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow, creaking across the ceiling. My first thought was burglars, but the sound didn't match. It was too slow, too deliberate. Then I heard the laugh. Ho, ho, ho. It wasn't cheerful or jolly, it was deep, almost guttural, vibrating through the walls. My chest tightened and I froze, staring at the fireplace. The fire had gone out hours ago, leaving the hearth cold and dark. The footsteps moved closer, stopping directly above the chimney. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, with a loud scrape and a heavy thud, something landed inside the fireplace. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through every possibility, a prank, a home invasion, but none of it made sense. And then he stepped out. The figure was enormous, hunched as he emerged from the fireplace. His red coat was stained with soot, and the fur trim was matted and yellowed. His beard hung in tangled strands, streaked with ash. His boots left wet, filthy prints on the rug as he moved toward the tree. I wanted to scream, but my voice was stuck in my throat. He didn't seem to notice me, or maybe he didn't care. He knelt by the tree, his massive frame dwarfing the presence beneath it, and began pulling objects from the sack slung over his shoulder. The gifts didn't look like the ones I'd wrapped. The paper was strange, dark and old, with patterns I didn't recognize. The tags all read from Santa in a looping, elegant script. When he finished placing the presents, he stood, brushing soot from his coat. His head tilted slightly as if listening for something. Then slowly he turned his head toward me. His eyes, coal-black and glinting, locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, his lips stretching too wide, revealing rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. "Merry Christmas," he rumbled, his voice deep and hollow. My legs finally obeyed me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding, as he turned back to the fireplace. With a grunt, he hoisted himself up the chimney in one swift, unnatural motion. The room was silent again, except for my ragged breathing. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the fireplace, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Eventually, Eric came downstairs, worried about the noise. "What's going on?" he asked, looking around. His eyes fell on the strange new gifts under the tree. "What are those?" He left them," I whispered. Eric frowned. "Who?" "Santa." He laughed nervously. "Very funny. Did you pick these up last minute or something?" I shook my head. "No." We both stared at the presents, neither of us wanting to touch them. Eventually, Eric bent down and picked one up. It was heavier than it should have been. The tag read, "To Jack, from Santa." "I don't like this," he said, setting it back down. "We should throw them out." But something stopped us. A feeling almost like a warning settled over the room. We left the gifts where they were and went upstairs, locking the bedroom door behind us. The next morning, the kids were ecstatic to find the new presents. Jack tore into one immediately, revealing the exact Lego set he'd been begging for. The same set I hadn't been able to find anywhere. "Santa brought it. I told you he was real," Jack said, his eyes shining. Emma opened her gift next, a porcelain doll with a strange old-fashioned dress. She hugged it tightly, smiling. "I love her." I didn't tell them what had happened. I didn't tell Eric that when I looked closer at the doll, its glassy eyes seemed to follow me. The kids played all day, happy and oblivious. But Eric and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I went back to the living room to clean up the wrapping paper. That's when I noticed the fireplace. The soot that had spilled onto the hearth wasn't just a mess. It was a perfect imprint of two boots, far larger than any human's. And next to the boots, scrawled in ash, was a single word: good. Three weeks ago, I went to see my best friend Kameko in Japan. I had recently had problems with the guy I dated, Chet, turning stalkery when I broke things off, and I wanted some time away from dealing with that. More importantly, I was excited both because I've never been to the country, or much of anywhere, and I hadn't seen her in person since a few weeks after college graduation, which had been almost 5 years ago. She had lived in Tokyo for a couple of years when she moved back, but when her grandmother had died, she inherited the woman's home out in the country about 20 kilometers from Osaka. It was a large house that'd been in the family for generations, and based on the pictures she had sent me, I was excited to stay in such a neat place too. She came to pick me up at the airport, and after hugging and talking excitedly for a few minutes, we headed to her car. She seemed just the same as she always had. Smart, funny, and full of life. But I know her too well. I could see something was worrying her as we drove through the beautiful countryside, her pointing out this cool thing or that historic site with a fluidity that made me wonder if she was making up some of the facts and names as she went. I laughed inwardly at the idea of her making up tourist facts, but when she took a break from pointing things out, I asked her if everything was okay. She glanced at me with a nervous smile. "You always do that." "Yeah, everything is okay, but I've been debating on when to tell you about the unique feature of my house." I had been smiling back, but I felt the expression slipping away at her tone. "What's that?" "Well, you know this is an old house I have, right? My great-great-grandparents built it over 100 years ago, and I had never even been to it while my grandmother was alive." I could tell she was trying to build up her courage to get it out, and before I could respond, she finally did. "Well, the house is kinda haunted. Kinda not really." Her voice went up at the end like she was asking for my confirmation. I raised an eyebrow. I had been expecting her to say the plumbing was bad or that the wiring was wonky. Not this. And kinda? What did that even... What I mean is, it's not a ghost, it's a yokai. Which I can tell you don't know what that is. Okay. It's kind of a general term for a wide variety of creatures and spirits in Japanese folklore. And apparently they're real, at least some of them, because I have one. I felt disoriented. I'd have thought it was a practical joke, but Kameko hated pranks and I could tell she was serious. I considered if she was on drugs or having a mental issue, but knowing her, that seemed unlikely too. So I decided to just roll with it. "Okay. Weird, so what kind of thing do you have? Can you see it?" She nodded slowly. "Oh yeah, and it sounds way creepier than it is. It's just a really big spider." Unexpectedly, a burst of laughter pushed its way out of my throat. "Fuck, I thought you were serious." Kameko was frowning and shaking her head, her eyes going between me and the road. "I am, and it's not really a spider, at least not a normal spider. But it's about the size of, well, like that show Lassie. It's about Lassie-sized, and it's lived there since the house was built. At least according to the letter my grandmother left me when she died. It doesn't hurt or bother anything or anybody, and most of the time it stays out of sight. Occasionally it'll come out to watch TV if I have it on. It likes game shows for some reason, but the best thing is it keeps the house immaculate." I blinked. "Your border collie-sized spider ghost is a maid." She shot me a look. "Not a ghost, a spirit or part spirit or whatever. But yes, it cleans. Never when you're around, and it has to be through magic, but I haven't had to lift a finger since I moved in." I turned in my seat to face her more directly. "Okay, what's the deal? Is this a joke about me being messy? I don't get it." She sighed. "I know how it sounds, but I didn't want you being terrified when you saw it. And you know I never would have invited you here if I didn't truly believe it's safe. It was weird for me at first, too. Now I kind of look at it like having a fucked up family dog that doesn't die." I opened my mouth to say something else, but I had no words. Finally, deciding I'd just have to let this weirdness play out, I said okay and settled back in my seat. When we arrived at the house, I was awestruck by how beautiful the house was. It was also very large, especially by Japanese house standards. We went through an outer gate and into a meticulously maintained garden. I gestured around and mouthed "spider," which got me a withering look as Kameko mimicked my gesture and mouthed "gardener." I grinned and shrugged, and then we went on inside. The interior of the home put the outside to shame. It was spotless, but I wouldn't have expected less from Kameko anyway, and it managed to be extremely clean and orderly without looking sterile or uninviting. I glanced around, simultaneously happy to be there and nervous, and finally I asked where it was. Shrugging, she led me deeper into the house. It's hard to say, it keeps to itself mainly, and it won't ever approach you, even though it doesn't run if you approach it. I guess in theory it would let you touch it, but I've never tried. She gave out a short laugh. This sounds so weird actually talking about it to another person. She suddenly stopped and turned, giving me a quick hug. I'm really glad you're here. It wasn't until that evening, after we had eaten dinner and settled in the living room to watch TV, that I saw the yokai. I had caught motion out of the corner of my eye and started to turn when the shape I saw froze me in place. If anything, Kameko had underestimated the thing's size. It moved silently into the room and slowly moved up a back wall until it was perched against the high ceiling. I heard Kameko's voice near my ear, telling me to breathe, that it was okay. To go ahead and look at it, it was fine, it didn't mind. With great effort, I turned my head more to see it more fully, taking in its dark form and the flickering of the light from the television. It reminded me somewhat of tarantula, but with large sets of black eyes, 3 smaller surrounding a larger on both sides of its face. I could feel it glance down at me for a moment, but then it seemed to go back to watching TV. If it had been anyone else, I would have run away then. As it was, I spent the next day trying to convince her it wasn't safe for her to stay, and she spent another 2 convincing me everything was fine. Ultimately, she won out. I stayed for another 5 days, had a great time, and by the end I actually waved bye to the spider as it crept across the foyer the day I left to return home. It glanced at me again, gave a slight nod, and went about its strange business. By the time I arrived home, the entire trip seemed surreal. I was also exhausted. I put down my suitcase, cleared out a spot on my messy bed, and fell asleep. I woke 5 hours later and seeing the piles of clothes, the furry dishes in the sink, and the general messiness that I could only partially blame on preparing for the trip, I found myself wishing I had a ghost spider made of my own. Shaking away the thought, and after a depressing look in the fridge, I went out for pizza. When I got back, everything was pristine. I felt a combination of wonder and terror. Had the spider somehow followed me here? That's when I saw my suitcase. It had been set against a wall and emptied, but when I got closer, I could still see a small bulge in the front pocket at the top. The pocket was partway unzipped, and I used the light on my phone to look inside. There was an egg in there, a strange, leathery black egg the size of a large chicken egg, its surface shiny except for intermittent dull flecks of green. Even at a distance, I could see the egg had been opened from the inside and was empty. I ran outside and called Kameko. She answered sleepily but woke up fast when I told her what I had found. She said her yokai was still there, but she guessed it had a baby. She said she would try to find out what she could, but to be very careful, as not all yokai are the same and some are very dangerous. I debated getting a hotel room but ended up going back in, promising myself I would run at the first sign of trouble. When I entered, I saw it. It was halfway up the wall of the front hall, looking at me with 8 small eyes of dark blue like sapphires. It was the size of a small kitten, and its legs and body were covered in what looked like white fur. Its head was the strangest part, as aside from its eyes, it looked more like the head of a weasel than a spider. I saw it open its mouth in a toothy yawn before giving me a small warbling greeting. It was almost cute, which probably meant it would kill me and fill my body cavity with eggs. I regretted the thought and swallowed. Are we cool? I felt like an idiot talking to a little monster on my wall, but it just blurted out. Then it nodded. Going to live here together and get along, not hurt each other? Another nod. Okay, cool, I guess. We'll try it out. Welcome home. The creature gave what I decided was a happy warble and nod before moving away down the hall. In the days since, everything has gone very well. It's still bizarre, of course, but I've adjusted quickly and had no real concerns until this morning, when I found the body in the guest room closet. I had gone upstairs to get a raincoat out of the closet, but I had trouble opening the door. When I did, I saw a man's body wrapped neatly in silk webbing sitting in the closet floor. I screamed, but before going into full panic mode, I realized the man was wearing a black ski mask. I studied him closer to the extent I could see through the webs. He had dark clothes, and a long skinning knife was clenched in his right fist. I recognized that knife. Chet used to carry it around in his truck the times we went out. I felt my stomach clench. I managed to slip the knife loose with some effort and used it to free enough webbing to remove the mask. Chet's face was hollowed and drawn, and I could see that his throat had been ripped out. It's hard for me to say how long he had been there, but I had seen enough to know what had happened. I grabbed my raincoat and went out. When I returned home that night, every trace of him was gone. For the 10th time, I considered calling the police, but what could I say? In the end, I sat down and turned on the television. It only took a minute to find a game show to watch. This text message is all that I have left, all that I will ever have left. Even my own death won't save me from this hell. I know he can see it, every word I write. Sometimes my words, sentences, get deleted and I can't do anything about it. I haven't kept track of how many times I've written this. The only thing I had kept track of was the amount of times I saw these grotesque arms. Twice. He's probably not paying attention to me. I have memorized every single line, every word, every character I want to share. Just like how I had memorized that pleased smirk that startled me to my core. He knew me. I had already seen him contact my friends, sent them pictures using my name. I often never dared to look at those pictures. Just based on the reaction of everyone, they seemed horrifying. I was being called names. Hate was flung against me. Whatever he sends them is something that affects them so deeply that I wouldn't even begin to understand how someone could learn so much personal information about so many people. His work was akin to that of a demon that had studied humans for far too long. I didn't want any of this. Even the calls that people have made to my phone have slowly ended. At first I had received a few and they showed genuine concern, but over time that concern faded. I sometimes checked my social media on my PC to see if things had changed. I opened up any way to contact anyone and what I saw was hollow. They were all there. I saw them interact, their posts, they seemed so happy. Over time that view into happiness had faded. I had been blocked by countless of them, but whenever I tried to reply to those who still had me as friends online, even if it worked for a moment, he deleted it. He posted whatever he wanted under my name. He, using my likeliness, accused my best friends of crimes I knew they were affected by. I wanted to move my cursor and just close whatever processes I had running to put an end to this, but he didn't let me, because whenever I tried to, my input devices stopped working. He must have installed a script that disabled my devices once I tried to open the task manager. All I could do on my PC was sit and watch. I missed the way my dogs would bark. I missed the way my wife talked to me. I could only watch as he burned everything to the ground. I had considered standing up already countless times, but I can't. I haven't been able to move in so many years. My legs feel numb. It was a miracle I could even use my hands enough to write. I was never bothered my inability to move. I was bound to my desk, but before everything happened, I was surrounded by those who loved me. Even right now, I never hated myself for it. My mouth slowly moved to form sentences whenever my caretaker came over. She saw me in my situation, but she never cared. No matter how many times I tried telling her, she just shoved food and drinks into my mouth and left. Despite that, I cannot blame her. I had looked at some of the images. He had sent her a photograph of her beloved daughter beheaded via my name. I don't know why he started any of that. I'm afraid to know the truth. Seeing the head of the girl always made me feel horrible and nauseous. I don't want to blame myself, but I can't shake of this feeling. I could have at least consoled her whenever she visited, but I never brought myself to do it. She must have despised me. No matter how many times I cursed at the situation, the mangled wreck I had become caused me to be unable to move, unable to fix what he is destroying. Eating was already a challenge, and so was enjoyment. But as soon as he got access to everything, I could do nothing but watch. He sent whatever he desired. I saw my beloved dog's corpse posted to a website about helping dogs. The caption made me look like I was some heartless monster that just got a kick out of posting this type of content. I'm scared. I am terrified of what he was doing, is doing, and will keep doing. I once saw texts appearing one day sent to my beloved wife. He had told her all my insecurities. He leaked my medical information on some shady sites and used that to convince her to commit suicide. The last time I saw her posting had been 5 months ago. She was someone always posts a lot, but I haven't seen anyone mourn her. The lack of mourning had always worried me. No one in my friend groups or family seemed to care, but at the same time, I don't know if they don't care or not. Because there was always the chance that he had deleted these messages for me, or spammed them with so much disgusting imagery and hateful messages that I couldn't see the heartfelt messages anymore. It had been years, and I never felt safe ever since. The pain in my heart at times was growing more intense as time went on. I could feel it starting to burst open again and again, that it would grow out of it once more, and each time I had written about my wife, I had lied. I knew the truth. I had not seen any positive message directed towards me in so many years, all because I had opened up one program too many. Someone I thought I could have trusted had sent me a file. He told me, hectic and in fear, that I should open it up immediately. Years back, when I was still naive, I had opened it up. I never thought that all of this would have happened because of one person that had it out for me. I was aware that maybe I have done some things wrong in my life, but this was beyond reason. I was afraid of this officer and what was truly going on in his mind. He was demonic in my eyes. It began infecting my computer, the only thing I had to talk to anyone. All the people I cared about were being sent messages that never belonged to me. The accident I suffered from made it impossible to change anything. Looking back at it, I saw him there. He, the officer, watched me with his pleased expression. I never knew why, but my treatment was lackluster. I was never able to recover as I should have had. I had the feeling this officer was the reason for it. My eyes were only able to look away. That never changed anything. He could still continue to drag me to hell. I am scared. I just wanted to be loved again. And from that point onwards, everything I had just described occurred. I don't think I can write this message for much longer. He had probably seen this message and variations of it countless times. I was fully aware of that. But it was the only thing he allowed me to do. Write, observe, survive. He was cruel and beyond any love, a real demon. At this point, I should just starve myself. I am terrified. If only my body was able to move, if only I was young again. Whenever I did try to starve myself, my caretaker forces food down my throat. She was not to blame, because if I were to die, she would be held accountable for it. I don't want to see anyone feel even worse. Even if I were to kill myself, my false digital footprint would continue moving because of him. Although I had considered it, I had attempted it. I was horrified of what things he had sent the youngest generations, my own grandchildren and their friends. Those were the only messages I had never read. I had no need to read them because I had already had the police knock at my door more than I can count. They raided my home, roughed me up, and searched through everything. They glared at me with a disgust only reserved for the lowest of scum. I could tell that if it wasn't illegal for them, they would have already caved in my skull with their guns. At this point, I wish it were legal for them to put me out of this hellish misery. Please, I am afraid of living. No matter how many times I silently begged for it, this demon was always changing their minds, although I knew some genuinely just did not care about me. I had heard the police enter my room so many times, go through everything so many times. Those stares, I wanted them to go away. They should have understood by now that all of this wasn't my fault. But they didn't, because every time I saw them going through my messages, all the vile messages stopped being written. The devil himself was there. No matter how often his body type changed, no matter if he got larger, smaller, or anything else. He was always there, watching my torment. I swear, it was as if I could often see the same police officer leading the raids. Every time the police visited, the officer gave me a look, not of disgust, but of something far worse. He looked pleased. I saw this small, hardly noticeable smirk a few times by this point. At one point, he had placed a machete into my room, but only after forcing me hold it. There was blood on that blade. I should have long been thrown into jail, but they always just leave me alone without doing so. I had heard them laugh when leaving my home. I don't even know how my home looked like anymore. It was probably broken and ruined. When I thought about that, I had never been visited by my wife in all this time. I knew why. I knew exactly why I hadn't seen her smile in a few months. I understood my situation, but every time I get to writing this part down, I felt myself want to die. I am scared. The truth is something I already knew. I just kept running away from it. The only thing I had to do to learn about the status of my wife was look to the corner of my room. She was hanging there, lifeless, from a rope that she herself had put there. Of course, they had never removed her. I can only see my life being further pulled into hell, all while she was rotting. The stench, I had never been able to get used to it, and no amount of looking at her would get me used to seeing her dead corpse dangling from the ceiling. I watched pieces of flesh falling from the body I once held so dear to me. To this day, I don't understand why this all happened. I never thought someone would feel pleasure from all of this. It scared me knowing that he was out there, taking my name to torment me. Even if I would have been able to move, I was afraid of doing anything about it, because what if someone recognized my face and assaulted me? The knocking on my window at night, that pleased smirk. This demon knew how much I feared that. I would never be able to forget it if I kept living. I knew he was occasionally just watching me through my window, voyeuristic, sadistic. He knew what he was doing to me. There was a question he asked me with his far too content expression, a question that was constantly replaying in my mind. You are still alive, you know, Zrania, Ansprosilminia. He knew far too well how I felt about being alive right now. Only a few more months and my body should hopefully die from old age. This was my only way out of this hell. At least I would find salvation. Then I wouldn't have to think about this question anymore, because I knew far too well that I was still alive. The devil knew it as well. That's why he tortured me with it. Thinking about it, the officer, no, that demon, was likely just waiting for me to die, to meet me in hell itself. I doubt he would stop tormenting my family and friends, though. I was fully aware of that. At least I was able to write this far. I had never been stopped from writing, only set back countless times, because to him this was likely just a game. I had glanced over to the machete more times than I can count. When I was younger, I never thought I would have wanted to die so much. At one point, as I had already mentioned, I had tried taking my own life using as much force as I could. I really did. I tried to purposefully choke on a piece of food that was too large for me. I planned on blocking my own airway, but the devil had other plans. I first thought that he was just human, but as I felt his arm growing out of my heart and reach into my throat to save me by pulling out the piece of food, I knew he was the devil. The thought that one day the devil would grow tired of tormenting me like a human could scared me. The deformation I witnessed when he grew his arm out of my own heart was terrifying and agonizing. Even if I could run away, he would just be with me all the time. Of course, I had no way of confirming that, but I felt it deep within me. Because even when I attempted to blind myself in the hopes that losing my vision would mean no longer seeing his pleased expression, his grotesque arms prevented that as well. I could not escape the torment. I could only wait. Wait and pray that it won't get worse. I had no intention of enraging him. That's why I only tried escaping this hell twice. Only twice did I see his arms. I was afraid of attempting it a third time because who knows what the devil would do then. What if whenever I try to do something he prevents, he is able to move further and further out of my body, until he could roam on earth in his true form, exiting my body as if it were a cocoon. If only I hadn't trusted him. I am scared of trusting anyone ever again. Have you ever heard of a mobile app called Death App? I asked Darren. What the hell is that? He replied, his brow furrowed. Well, have you ever heard of augmented reality? A few years ago, a game using augmented reality went viral. It had people running around town hunting for Pokemon with an app that displayed a camera screen showing where those Pokemon were hiding. The players saw the Pokemon on their phone's camera-like screen as if the cartoon creatures were there, but in reality they weren't. Darren remained silent for a few seconds, looking as though he was trying to recall something. Yeah, I didn't play it, but I remember. Now, back to the app I was talking about. Death App, I continued. It's based on a similar concept. When users point their phone's camera at real-life locations, it shows something. I paused. Nope, not Pokemon. I paused again. Dead people. 3D designs? Must be 3D designs. If not CGI, Darren interjected. No man, not 3D designs or CGI, I explained. It shows actual dead people, or at least that's what it looks like. Way too realistic. I worked as a nurse in one of the largest hospitals in town, and Darren was my coworker. Pulling my phone out of my pocket, I turned it on and tapped the Death App icon. The app's interface displayed only a camera screen with no shutter button. It's just an app that uses the phone's camera system, so what? Darren asked sarcastically. I asked him to follow me to the emergency room. When we arrived, the room was nearly empty. with only a few nurses and doctors attending to one or two patients. I lifted my phone and aimed its camera at one of the empty beds. On my screen, a man wearing a construction worker's uniform appeared, bleeding profusely. I walked closer to the bed, aligning my phone's camera precisely where the man's head appeared on the screen. Darren and I saw a disturbingly realistic image of a man, severely injured, blood covering his face, neck, and uniform. "You said it looks like augmented reality," Darren remarked, still skeptical. "It does look like one to me, and just like any other augmented reality, my friend, it's not real. It's merely a graphic, made to look like it's real. It's not." Darren rolled his eyes, completely annoyed. "Okay," I said, "but this isn't the first time I've used this app." "So?" he asked, sounding even more sarcastic. "I've been scanning the ER for the past 2 days. Remember that horrible accident yesterday? 3 victims were brought here around 8 p.m. and died shortly after. Yeah, I remember. Well, I scanned the ER with this app in the afternoon, hours before the victims arrived, and I saw their faces in the app. I opened my phone's gallery and navigated to the screenshot folder. The app doesn't have a shutter button, so I had to take screenshots to document it. I showed Darren one of the screenshots, which clearly displayed the app's interface and one of the victims. "You helped with this guy, didn't you? There's no way you've forgotten his face already." Darren looked surprised. "Must be a coincidence. Maybe it's just a look-alike." "Maybe. But this guy wasn't the first," I argued. "The app shows images of people who will die in specific locations. Within 12 hours, I've seen it happen multiple times." Darren still wasn't convinced. I understood. "Tell you what," I said. "I'll take a screenshot of the dead guy we just saw and we'll wait." I did just that. Hours later, Darren came running toward me, panic etched across his face. "Luke, your phone, he shouted, gasping for air. Wait, what?" "Your phone," he repeated, "the screenshot from the app." "It's happening?" I asked, alarmed. I followed him to the ER, pulling out my phone and opening the screenshot. When we reached the room, we got as close as we could without interfering with the staff. Same uniform, a construction worker, I thought. It was the same victim, in the same condition. As I glanced at his face, my stomach turned. It was him. "You believe me now?" I asked Darren as we stepped out of the ER. "It's still hard to process, but..." He hesitated. "How the hell does this happen? Where did you get the app?" "The dark web," I admitted. "A friend shared it in a group chat." "You shouldn't mess with anything from the dark web, man," Darren warned. We chatted more about the app on our way home. Our shift had ended and Darren was staying at my place for the night. Once we arrived, he went to use the bathroom. As I waited, an unsettling thought struck me. I'd been using the app at work, at the hospital, because death was common there, especially in the ER. But it didn't occur to me to try to scan my own house. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the app and began scanning. Bedroom, nothing. Kitchen, nothing. Dining room, nothing. Garage, nothing. Finally, I aimed my camera at the living room. There on the couch, right across from the TV, I saw something laying on the app's screen that was not on my couch. I walked closer toward the couch, and as I got close enough to see the face, my phone slipped from my hand. My face went pale in horror. The dead body that appeared to be laying on my couch on the app's screen was my very own body. It was me, lying on the couch, throat slit. If the app was real, and I had proven it was, then I would be dead in less than 12 hours. Murdered. But by who? An intruder, perhaps a robber? Someone was about to break into my house in the next few hours, trying to rob me and murdered me in the process. Then relief washed over me. Darren was staying the night. I could warn him about the possible intruder and either get his help to prepare for a defense or leave together to find somewhere else to stay for the night. I might be able to avoid my death. 1 second later, it hit me. Darren was staying the night. Man, those old home videos. They're all grainy, the colors washed out, like the sun bleached the memory right off the tape. But there we are, me and Kevin. Skinny little punks on our bikes, that Indiana sun just cooking the asphalt. Kevin's got this huge, goofy grin, a little crooked, yeah, thanks to that chipped tooth from the tree. That kid, he just believed. Like anything was possible, like we were living in some kind of adventure movie. Me? Even now, watching it again, there's this tightness in my chest, like I'm just waiting for something bad to happen. Always have been, I guess. 1993, 12 years old. We really didn't have a goddamn clue what was coming. I can't watch them too often, those tapes. It's a gut punch right here. Reminds you of before, when scraped knees felt like the end of the world. Now it's just quiet after you hit stop. Too quiet. Like the silence is full of the things that aren't there anymore. Like you can almost hear them if you listen close enough. We grew up in that small town, southern Indiana, right on the edge of the Hoosier. Picture it. Those old houses with the wide porches where the paint was always peeling a little. The cicadas just screaming all summer long, that smell of wet dirt and dead leaves that just clung to everything, even your clothes. After school, our bikes, man, that was it. That was the whole damn world. Every crack in the sidewalk, every overgrown lot, fueled by cheap juice boxes and that energy you just can't buy. Can't get back no matter how hard you try. And then there was Blacktop Road. Nobody called it that officially. County Road 300 South, I guess, on the maps. But everyone around here, we just knew it as Blacktop. It snaked out of our neighborhood and just dove into this thick patch of woods. Maybe a mile. The trees were so tall, so close, they practically touched overhead. Even when the sun was blazing everywhere else, it was always dim there. The road was all busted up. The air always felt colder, heavier, thick with the smell of damp earth and those decaying leaves. That almost sweet, rotten smell. I hated that road, man. Not a monster under the bed hate, more like this feeling, this deep down wrongness the second we turned onto it. The way the light did these weird things through the leaves, all fractured and broken. The rustling that always sounded like people whispering just out of sight, just at the edge of the trees. It just freaked me out. I'd pedal like hell, trying to get out of there. My eyes jumping at every shadow that moved, every sound that wasn't just the tires on the cracked asphalt. Kevin, that little maniac, he ate that shit up. He'd be yelling, laughing at me, calling me a chicken, his voice echoing in the trees. Dude, it's just trees. He was like that, fearless, this little Fred Savage look-alike with the perpetually scraped knees and this insane need for adventure. With him there, even Blacktop Road felt almost okay. His dumb confidence, it was like this force field, this shield against whatever my brain was conjuring up in those woods. I remember this one night, late September. You could feel fall coming, that crispness in the air. The sun was already going down, making the sky all these crazy colors, all bruised oranges and purples. We were racing like always. First one to the streetlight at the entrance, that was the deal. And that night, I was actually winning. I don't know. Maybe it was the cool air biting at my cheeks. Maybe I just got lucky for once, but my legs felt good. I was breathing easy. I looked back. Stupid, I know, you never look back. And Kevin was a few lengths back, yeah, but he was grinning, pushing hard, but maybe there was something else in his eyes that I didn't see then. A tightness around them. We hit Blacktop Road and bam, that cold, heavy feeling hits you like a wall. The trees just swallow the light, just close in around you. The wind screamed past my ears, damn near drowned out the sound of our tires crunching on the gravel. That creepy feeling was there, like it always was, but I was too focused on winning. Just kept pedaling, eyes glued to that little bit of light up ahead, that orange glow waiting for me. Then I'm out, back on our street, and it's like taking a breath after holding it too long, that release. I look back, expecting to see Kevin right there, his goofy grin, but nothing. Just the shadows getting longer in the quiet of the evening. It wasn't instant panic, not at first. Just, where the hell is he? Maybe he stopped, dropped his chain, got a flat. I waited by the streetlight, that pale orange glow making everything look weird and stretched out, those long, distorted shadows. The minutes just crawled by, each one heavier than the last. That feeling of winning, it was just gone. Replaced by this knot in my stomach that just kept tightening, twisting. Then the streetlights click on, that pale, fake light, and it makes the shadows jump. And Kevin's still not there. That's when it hit. That cold, awful fear. Just washed over me, made my legs feel like they were full of concrete. The idea of going back down that road by myself in the dark? No freaking way. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Like it had a shape, every leaf that rustled sounded like something coming closer, something breathing. I just ran. Crying, yeah, trying to tell my parents what happened, but it all came out wrong, all choked up. The phone calls, the looks on their faces, Kevin's parents. The search party going out into the dark, their flashlights slicing through the trees. It's all blurry now, like some messed up dream I can't shake off. They found his bike the next day, way off the road, deep in the trees, all twisted up in the bushes. His jacket was there too, that old denim one with the worn collar, snagged on a low branch. But no Kevin, just the jacket and the bike, like he'd just vanished. The cops, the volunteers calling out his name, dogs barking in the woods, that hollow, desperate sound. Nothing. He was just gone. Like the woods just reached out, those long, dark arms, and took him. Swallowed him whole for years, man. I'd just replay that night. The race, the wind in my ears, that stupid feeling of winning. And then, nothing. That empty road stretching back into the darkness. The regret just sticks with you, doesn't it? Like a bad taste you can't get rid of. Why didn't I wait? Why didn't I just turn around? I should have turned around. Even back then, I'd get this image in my head on Blacktop Road. This dark shape standing in the trees, just watching, just at the edge of the light. Never really saw it, not clearly, just my stupid imagination, I told myself. But after Kevin, I'd catch myself staring into the woods, especially when the sun started to go down, thinking I'd see it. That silent figure waiting in the shadows. Waiting. 31 years, man. 31 years and he's still gone. The what-ifs still get me sometimes, late at night when everything's quiet. What if I'd slowed down? What if I hadn't been so focused on winning for once? Sometimes in my dreams I do slow down. I turn back, and I see him there, but then the dream just cuts out. There's just a sound, like a snap, yeah, or maybe it's just the silence rushing in to fill the space where he used to be. When I drive back home now, for holidays, for whatever, I always slow down when I get to that stretch of 300 South, Blacktop Road. The trees are taller now, the shadows darker, longer, and they seem to creep further across the road. And even now, after all this time, there's that little flicker of fear, that cold spot deep in my chest. I still see it sometimes, that shape in the trees, just for a split second, hanging at the edge of my vision. You know, looking back on all of it, it hits me now hard. Kevin definitely let me win that race. He never let me win. He was too competitive, too proud. That night, when I looked back, there was something in his eyes. Not just the grin. There was something else. Something tight, something scared. And when he yelled, "Whoa, you're actually gonna beat me this time. Keep it up, man." It wasn't like him. It was like he was trying too hard, trying to sound normal. He saw something in those trees that night. I'm sure of it now. Whatever the hell was hunting us that night, he wasn't racing me. He was making damn sure I got to those streetlights. He was putting distance between me and whatever the hell it was. And him, he was left alone with it. He knew. He knew if we had done things the same, him making it to the streetlight first, like always, maybe he would be the one sitting here, 31 years later, writing this. And maybe I was the target that night. It was watching us in those trees. I can feel it even now. It knew I was slower, yeah, always a little slower. It knew I was the easier target. Just thinking about it now, my skin crawls. My stomach turns. Damn it, Kevin. Max was an outside dog. Always had been. Rain, snow, or shine, he'd never once begged to come inside. His place was in the yard, under the open sky, guarding his territory. But tonight was different. It wasn't the weather. Though the cold gnawed at my bones, it was him. Max scratched at the door with a desperation I'd never heard before, his whimper low and mournful, almost like a baby crying. It sent a chill crawling up my spine. At first, I tried to ignore it, figuring he'd calm down eventually like he always did. He was a tough dog, after all. But the sound only got louder, more frantic, more urgent. Each scratch against the wood made my nerves fray. I couldn't take it anymore. All right, I grumbled, dragging myself to the door. When I opened it, Max darted in without hesitation. His tail was tucked tight between his legs, his eyes wide and frantic, darting around the room like he expected something to leap out at him. I'd never seen him like this before, shaking, almost vibrating with fear. "Max, what's wrong, buddy?" I asked, kneeling down to his level. He stuck to me like glue, his whimpering relentless, even as I tried to comfort him with soft words and reassuring pats. But he didn't seem to hear me. His body was rigid, his muscles tense. I chalked it up to coyotes or maybe a distant thunderstorm spooking him. He'd never been scared of much before, but there's a first time for everything. Then I noticed something odd. Max wasn't wearing his collar. I frowned. I'd clipped it on him just this morning before I left for work. He never took it off. "Did it fall off outside, buddy?" I asked, reaching to pet him. But he flinched at my touch, shrinking away from me like I was a stranger. That wasn't like Max. Not the Max I knew. The hours ticked by. I couldn't shake the unease creeping over me. Every time I glanced at him, he was already staring at me. Not his usual loving gaze, but something colder, more calculating. His eyes, normally full of warmth, seemed empty, like they belonged to something else entirely. Then came the barking. It echoed from the yard, loud and desperate, a sound I recognized instantly. It was Max, or at least it sounded exactly like him. But that couldn't be possible. Max was here, right here in the house. Heart pounding, I crept to the window and peeked outside, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the yard, was Max. The real Max. His tail wagged weakly as he let out another pitiful whimper, his eyes locked on the house. He looked cold and scared, but alive. Alive and real. I turned back to the dog in my living room, my chest tightening. He was still staring at me, but now, he was smiling. Not a dog's smile. A grotesque, impossible grin that stretched wider and wider, his jaw cracking as if unhinged. His limbs began to lengthen, twisting and contorting until he stood on two distorted legs, towering over me. "Why'd you let me in?" it hissed, the voice no longer belonging to anything earthly. It was deep, guttural, and filled with malice. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing that stood before me wasn't Max. It never had been. Looking to buy a home is its own special kind of hell. Between a fairly limited, tiny budget, predatory real estate companies, and a healthy amount of flat-out lies on website listings, you can imagine me and my fiancée, Haley's surprise when we came across a listing that was, by most metrics, a dream home. It was a 2-story home near downtown Athens, Georgia. It was within walking distance to grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, and bars. It was almost perfectly in between both of our jobs and within 15 minutes of each to boot. We shouldn't have even been allowed to set eyes on a house like this, but it was well within our pitiful price range. We met with an agent who showed us the home. For a house built over a century ago, it was in remarkable shape. It was decorated with antiques. The walls were lined with paintings, portraits, and photographs of the original owners. I was the one who asked why it was so cheap. I'll give you the spark notes. The original owners sold it about a decade after it was built with no listed reason. The new owners owned it for the next 45 years, and those guys were the town lunatics. At the end of their tenure, which ended when the youngest and final tenant hung himself in the guest room, the house was sold to a real estate company who tried to remodel it. Plans for the remodel never went through, and instead were pivoted to be a simple renovation. Around 1970, the house finally sold again to another man. He lived there until he passed away in 2012. The house has remained unoccupied since. So, in short, the realtor said at the end of his story, it's probably haunted. It was a good story. Haley said it'd be fun to tell people once we started inviting guests over. We started signing papers that day. We were moved in after a few weeks, and the first 2 months were domestic bliss. We did away with a lot of the original decorations. We kept some of the old paintings up. Who was I to turn down free fine art? But took down most of the photographs and antiques. A few we managed to sell off, others we donated, a couple of the real nice ones we put in our attic. Over time, we replaced it with our stuff, posters and photos we had brought from our old apartment. After a while, it started to feel like our home. Of all the rooms in the house, the one we used the least was our guest room. We hadn't even bothered to remove the mattress or desk that had been in the room when we purchased the house. In fact, all we had done in the room since we had moved in was poke our head in, look around a little, and then shut the door. To be honest, I had almost forgotten about it until one day, about 2 months into living there, my fiancée asked about it. I was sitting on our couch watching TV when my Haley came to me, a confused look on her face that I had rarely seen before. "Have you heard scratching from the guest room?" Now, me and Haley had always enjoyed playing jokes on each other. always harmless and usually in good spirits. Once I gave her a bag of spicy sweet chili Doritos, which she doesn't like, only for the bag to be filled with Cool Ranch chips, which are her favorite. One year on my birthday, she handed me a copy of Barbie Horse Adventures on the PS2, only for the disc to be for Red Dead Redemption 2, which I had been asking for. At the time, it was easy to assume she was just joking. I decided to play along. Yeah, it must have been the rats I'm fostering. Did I forget to feed them this morning? She half smiled but said, "No, Lisa, I'm serious." I thought I heard something. At that, I paused my show and got up. Lisa followed me to the guest room. It looked like it did last time I had poked my head in a month and a half ago. I made a point to check everything while she watched from the doorway. If this was one of her jokes, the punchline was probably hidden somewhere. Part of me thought it might be a cat. I had been talking about wanting one, but to my surprise, the room was completely empty. No hidden cats, no fostered rats, nothing. Haley seemed even more confused. I told her that maybe it was a rat. Rodents like that could get into pretty much anywhere, and could hide easily. It wouldn't have surprised me if there were some rats already living there that no one had noticed, or that moved in during the interim. I offered to call an exterminator, which she agreed to. The exterminator came the next day while me and Haley were at work and gave the house a complete look over, but couldn't find any evidence of a rodent problem. I decided that whatever had scratched on the door had simply found another way out, and was off on whatever adventures rats went on. Haley wasn't entirely convinced by it, but she acquiesced. Over the next couple of weeks, I tried to keep an ear out for anything coming from the guest room. I was still convinced rats were getting in somehow. I even bought some rat poison that I sprinkled on the outside of the house, just in case. But I never noticed any fuzzy little corpses showing up around our home. I think I might have accidentally killed a squirrel, though. Sorry, little guy, this all came to a head yesterday. I was able to get off from work a few hours earlier than normal, and went home, only to see Haley's car in the driveway. In the 3 years we had been together, Haley had gotten off early from work exactly 2 times, and they were both on Christmas. I called for her when I entered, and she called my name from the guest room. She sounded frantic, scared even. The room looked like it had been ransacked, with Haley in the middle of the mess. "Haley, what the hell?" When she turned, the look on her face held the next words in place. It was a look of worry, of fear. I had never seen before, and it broke my heart in a way I can't really describe. "I heard someone," she said. Someone, not something. It was around then I noticed the kitchen knife she was holding, and I reflexively took a step back. She looked like she was about to cry. I had a lot of questions, a lot, but for some reason the only one I could ask at the moment was, "Why are you home so early?" She blinked a few times, fighting back the tears, and said, "I don't know." She said it had been an impulse and her boss didn't put up any objections. She said she heard a voice whisper "hi" as she walked past the guest room, grabbed the knife, and started turning the room over. I held out my hand and asked her to hand over the knife, which she did slightly reluctantly. I told her she should go lie down, and she agreed. I held her close as we walked back to our room. When I knew she was asleep, I called a plumbing company and scheduled them to come out to check for a gas leak, my new working theory. When Haley woke up from her nap, I suggested we go stay at her sister's house for a few days. She agreed, we packed, and drove to the other side of the city to stay with Haley's sister. We were asleep on the couch, Haley cuddled on top of me. She started moving. The clock on the wall said it was 3 a.m., and Haley was putting on her sandals. "What's wrong?" I asked, still 3/4 asleep. "I want to go home." I didn't really process what she had said at first and asked, "What?" I don't want to be away for too long. What if it really was something? It could be hiding there right now." I was half asleep now and a little annoyed. "Babe, it'll be fine. The plumber will be out tomorrow to fix the gas leak. We can go back Friday." I motioned for her to come back as I made myself comfortable. "What gas leak?" I realized I probably shouldn't have said that. I sat back up, now fully awake. "I thought it might be, a gas leak. I called a plumber to check." She looked mad at that. "What? You think I'm going crazy?" "No," I said, hoping I didn't wake up Haley's sister. "I just don't think it can hurt to check. I don't think anyone is living in our home without us knowing, babe." She still looked upset, but it was softening. I motioned for her again. "Come back to bed. We can go in the morning if you want." She nodded but didn't get back on the couch with me. She took a seat on the love seat next to it and said, "I want to sleep here tonight, okay?" I reluctantly said, okay, adjusted myself one last time and went back to sleep. This morning, Haley's sister woke me up asking if I knew where Haley was. I got up in a panic and ran outside to our car, but it was gone. I ran back to her sister's apartment and told her to drive me back to our house. She agreed, confused but willing enough. A few minutes into the drive, we hit traffic. After a while of uncomfortable silence, I said, "Hey, Kara, do you know if Haley has any sort of history with mental illness or anything like that?" Kara shook her head. "No, not that I know about. Why? Think she's going crazy?" I thought about our conversation earlier that morning and my heart panged. Less than 5 hours had passed, and I was already making a liar of myself. "She's been acting weird since we moved in. She left work early a few weeks ago." "What?" Kara asked with genuine surprise. I nodded. "I know. And she woke up in the middle of the night trying to go home. I thought it might be a gas leak, but—" "I see what you mean," she said solemnly. We finished the drive in silence. When we got there, the car was in the driveway. The front door was wide open. I hadn't been called by the company yet, so I figured they hadn't made it out yet. A part of me thought that was a good thing. It meant backup might be there soon. The term backup made me disgusted with myself. We got out of the car. I took point as we entered. Kara called out for Haley, no answer. I called out nothing. I didn't need her to answer to know where she was, though. "Come on," I said. "She's in the guest room." "How do you know?" "I know." I led us upstairs, stopping in front of the door. I checked the doorknob. It was unlocked, but I was reluctant to open it. I knocked gently. "Babe?" There was a long moment of silence before she responded with a weak, "Yes? Is everything all right?" "Yeah," she said. She sounded dazed. "I'm fine. Can you come out?" "No, thanks." I took a step back. Kara looked from me to the door. "Can we come in?" She didn't answer for an agonizingly long time before finally saying, "Yes." Both of us stared at the doorknob, neither wanting to open it. It was Kara who finally did, slowly opening the door, eerily silent on its 100-year-old hinges. I had expected to see the room as it was when we left, ransacked. When I could finally see inside, it was spotless. All the furniture had been moved back into place. The photos and paintings had been placed back up on the wall in their cracked or broken frames. Haley was sitting on the foot of the bed, staring blankly at the door. "Babe?" I said, stepping ahead of Kara as we entered. "We should head back to Kara's. The plumbers haven't come by yet." "No," Haley said. "They don't need to come." The pit in my stomach that had been opening since we left Kara's apartment had finally opened wide enough to where I couldn't ignore it. "But if it's a gas leak, it really isn't safe to—" "It's not a gas leak," she said, looking from us to the room around her. "Not an intruder, not rats, and not ghosts." She paused for a moment. "Not really." "Haley," Kara said, her voice shaky. "What's wrong?" It took a second for Haley to look at her sister, but when she did, it was in a moment of lucidity. "Nothing," she said, her face tightening seriously. "I promise." She looked at me again. "I'll come out in a little bit, okay? I just want to be here for a while." Kara and I looked at each other. Then I looked back at Haley. A large part of me wanted to go to her, to hug her, to start crying and tell her I'm worried about her. But another part, smaller but much stronger, kept me in place. "Okay, I'll be here when you're ready." I backed out. Kara slowly followed. I shut the door as we left. Kara looked horrified. "What the fuck?" she whispered, quickly moving away from the guest room, downstairs to the front door. "What the fuck is wrong with my sister?" I followed her down and out of the house as she walked back to her car. "I don't know, I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Kara put a hand on my shoulder. I could tell she wanted to offer something, anything that might help, but she was coming to the same conclusion as me at that moment. What could we do? I took a deep, shaky breath. "I'll figure something out, I promise. I'll try to get her away from the house, or—" I shrugged. I knew Kara could tell that I have no idea what I'm going to do. "It'll be fine," I lied. Kara nodded, unlocking her car. "All right, just let me know if you need anything, okay?" "Okay," I say weakly. She gets into her car and drives away. It's been a few hours since then. The plumbers aren't coming out anymore. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen. I've been sitting outside the guest room, waiting for Haley to come out. Sometimes I hear her talking. When she does, she sounds dazed and lost. I'm coming here because I really don't know what else to do. I'm worried about my fiancé and hope that maybe someone here can tell me what to do. Please help. First off, thanks to everyone who listened to my story without calling me completely insane. Honestly, after this week, I wouldn't blame you if you're still unsure whether I'm losing my mind. But I have to apologize. I've teased you about ghosts before, but today, I want to talk about someone who's very much alive, or at least I think he is. Coming from England, I never knew much about America, especially Louisiana. The only image I had was from that Disney film with the singing frog. But my ranch, well, it's a different story. The geography confuses me. For the most part, it's fine. It sits beside a massive river. To the west of the house is a vast expanse of mangrove trees, endless mud and stagnant water. But to the east, past the dirt track, there's a large cattle field about an acre. There's a tiny tin shack where the cattle stay, and the land itself is full of deep holes filled with murky water. It's hard to make sense of it. The rest of the land around here is wild, untamable marsh. Then there's this flat, cultivated field, almost as if someone flattened it over the river trying to make it fit. But the real story I need to tell you is about my ranch hand. I don't know who he is, I don't know where he came from, and I don't know if he's alive or if he's something else. I see him now, in fact. From my bedroom on the second floor, I watch him move through the stables, his movements stiff, like one of those old animatronic figures you see at amusement parks. It's not natural. He's tossing hay into the rundown, decaying stables without breaking a sweat, like the weight of it doesn't bother him at all. The worst part? There are no horses in those stables. The hay just piles up, left to rot on the damp floor, the smell of decaying straw thick in the air. Every time I step outside, it hits me like the stench of rotting corpses. I want to scream at him to stop, but I can't. I'm afraid of him. And here's another thing, I don't know his first name. He just goes by Anderson. The same last name my dad had. But no, he can't be related. If he were, he would have inherited the ranch, wouldn't he? Unless he's a distant cousin, some half-uncle. But there's something off about him, something I can't put my finger on. He's so rude. I don't think he's very bright. Mostly he just grunts when I try to talk to him. But there's something else in his eyes. A spark of cruelty, something I can't ignore. Maybe I'm just being paranoid after everything that's happened, but I can see it, clear as day. I want to tell you about 2 encounters I had with him. The first one happened on my very first night here at the ranch. I was still shaken from my ghost encounter earlier that day, trying to settle into the manor. I'd just gotten ready for bed and was creeping toward the lamb, bracing myself to face the darkness when I saw him. He was walking down the dusty track, massive, looming, nearly 7 feet tall. His clothes were dirty, stained with something dark. He wore a greasy baseball cap and had a patchy, untamed mullet. He looked wrong, like something out of place. He grabbed a pitchfork and began shoveling cattle muck into a big bucket. I stood frozen, watching him from the window. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. Every time he lifted his head, I half expected him to see me, to come for me. But he didn't. He didn't look malformed like the ghost from earlier. He just looked dirty, like someone who'd been living in filth for years. After what felt like an eternity, he finished and stomped off down the track. Before he disappeared from view, he turned and shot me a glare intensely, blazing. Like he was marking me, deciding if I was a threat. Then he was gone. 2 days ago, I got up early to feed the cattle. They're beautiful creatures, very calming. The cowshed was barely holding together, rust streaking down its walls, the air thick with the scent of mold and manure. Flies buzzed lazily, landing on me no matter how many times I swatted them away. There was a chill to the wind, sharp and biting, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. The cattle could feel it too. They were on edge, skittish, like something was wrong. I had just finished putting their food out when I saw him. "Morning, mate," I chimed, trying to act kindly despite how much I fear him. "It's bloody warm today, isn't it?" "S'pose," he responded, with a sound that was less like speech and more like a snort. He didn't even look at me when he spoke, and when I looked at him, well, I try not to be rude, but his face, it looked like something out of a nightmare. A huge, bloated mass of a man, his eyes too wide, his features twisted and unkempt like a hog with human skin. I wanted to ask you something. How much am I meant to be paying you? I didn't even know you worked here, and, well, I don't have much money right now, I asked, my voice trembling more than I meant it to. Nothing, I work for free. Anderson grunted, his voice flat, void of emotion. The way he said it was wrong, like he'd said it 1,000 times before, like it wasn't even a choice. His eyes met mine, and I couldn't look away. His pupils were wide too wide, and it felt like he could see straight through me, reading every fear I had, like he was savoring it. Surely I should pay you something. You've been saving me a lot of work. I started, my throat dry, but I barely finished the sentence before he took a step closer. His sweat clung to him, thick, stinking. He wore nothing but ragged dungarees, and his scent hit me all at once, rank, sour, like death itself. Anything for family, he muttered, his voice colder than before, dragging the words out with deliberate slowness. The pause that followed stretched on forever. My stomach twisted, a knot of dread tightening as I fought the urge to run. But before I could speak, before I could react, he turned and ran off. No, not just ran, he sprinted faster than any man should be able to. It was unnatural, and I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as he disappeared into the distance, like a shadow vanishing before dawn. That moment keeps replaying in my mind. What terrifies me most about him is that he's not a ghost, not something intangible that fades away in the light of day. No, he's real. A living, breathing man, or whatever he is. I keep wondering, maybe he's just socially awkward. Maybe I'm overreacting. But I don't think so. There's something dark about him. Something lurking beneath the surface. The way he said family, it was too cold, too distant. And when I look at him, I feel like a stranger on my own land. As if I'm the ghost here. As if I don't belong. But this is my ranch. I guess every family has that one distant relative, the drunk uncle. The cousin who makes Christmas dinners uncomfortable, and maybe Anderson's mine. But, not to sound cruel, but why did he survive that massacre and not my father? I guess what I'm really trying to say is, I'm struggling to run this ranch even without the ghosts. What I needed was help, support, not this thing. I don't know who Anderson is. I don't know where he came from. I don't even know if he's alive or if he's something else entirely. But there's something he's hiding from me. Something he knows about this place. And I can't shake the feeling that ghosts aren't the only thing I should be afraid of. Should I ask him? Or would that be the worst mistake I could make? Our new doctor came in quicker than anyone had expected. Barely had the time to confirm Hannah's text in our little trailer-sized domicile when I had noticed a perennial little shadow at the edge of my door's little peep window. How strange, I wondered silently with the closing of my eyes, a sigh to prepare myself and the brushing of my hand on the grip of my revolver. Dem nerds from China had quite clever ways of working their ways through all avenues of science and technology, but nobody had expected them to work this fast. As much as I had been rattled, a guest was still a guest. This down south in America meant that you were entitled some southern hospitality no matter you're from, or at the very least some kindness by the lady that you were supposed to work with on account of your handler being restricted by the inner machinations of international bureaucracy. Hand still wrapped round the wooden grip of my revolver. I got up from the dim warmth of my bedroom and started walking through the girl-rotten mess of my home to peek through the foggy peephole. The new doctor hadn't even bothered to knock on the door, holler, or be anything close to welcoming. And I meant that in the most literal sense. People like me don't have the luxury of being cosmetically judgmental, so I'll assume the descriptions alone would be enough to do their job. Pitch black eyes that glittered under the street lamp's amber din like a hungry fruit flies circling tantalizing rotten cactus fruit. Skin whose pallor resembled those of a corpse at the undertaker's. Lips pursed so tightly that it may have as well been a straight line. I don't know how long we stood staring at each other through the peephole, but it was long enough that her lovely little compounds transitioned into lazily shaded black, once I took my fifth blink in an unspoken staring contest. It was strange how she never really asked to let herself in, but Chinese had tons of weird customs, so at the time I thought it to be just another rule of giving courtesy to the homeowner, or something like that. Hannah was the exotic local from those parts while I was born and raised on the res. Never been overseas beyond continental lines and maybe a few trips to see some friends down the border. I wouldn't have admitted to her face, but even now I don't think I could accurately see the difference between Korean and Japanese script. It also took Hannah too long to realize that we don't build totem poles in the desert, so in some comically offensive sense it makes us even. But this insistence to cultural norms, even as the harsh desert winds blew across the night, was a bit absurd. It's only logical for the human body to self-preserve by seeking shelter. Same for an animal. So what was the matter with this new doctor? Well, shit. As much as I'd love to let the doctor stand on my porch all night, hospitality was still hospitality. Folk here have unspoken rules of their own. You're gonna obey 'em for social capital, but I don't like it when Hannah speaks all fancy about humane things. I prefer believing in being kind for its own sake. Against my basal instincts, I would sigh, then open up the door with my left hand, the one not grasping on the grip of my revolver. Howdy, missus. I greet them with an appraising look, hoping that my not very rugged attire of pajamas wouldn't make me look like a wimp. The smaller woman in front of me was dressed fairly strangely for the part. Black sweater worn underneath a pristine white lab coat and black trousers over heeled boots. In her hands was a shiny Tai-Hyung smartwatch, state-of-the-art and the very latest in model, definitely very expensive, contrasted highly with the real worn-down leather bag that looked like one of the old-timey antiques from Doc Randall's office, looking more like a period piece than one of my own good pieces if you catch my drift. How'd I? The doctor tilted her head. Quickly she would open up her bag with her own hands and reach in, pulling out an unmarked black notebook and then frowning. I give her some time to read up. Rectangular phone in her trousers gave me the impression that she had a good sense of tech along with fancy smart glasses. No idea why the doctor had to use something this old school in the modern age. But I like it. We're already warming up. My name is Dr. Yuyani. I'm being hosted from Xi'an, China. I currently work at Jiao Tong University and am on a research trip to Pyramid Lake. Recommended to the United States Anomalous Firewatch Service on the behest of Dr. Hannah Zhou, Ph.D. You ever know how a robot talks? Not the ones from Transformers or the Terminator, but from one of them analog horrors where the characters face down screeching abominations derived from meme culture that communicates in text-to-speech syllables that have been audibly blasted at the highest volume. Like that one particular creepy voice from the EAS sirens, just modulated by whatever forces deigning Yui into being pitch perfect. But I couldn't shake off the strange pronunciation of the latter parts of her name, so foreign to my tongue that upon silently mouthing it, I found myself slipping into the tones I used for my own half-dead tongue. Different from English in how the syllables were dragged out rather than pronounced practically, yet similar to the curt tones of Mandarin like a blend of all three languages. Yeah, I think I getcha. Who was I to bother delving into such casual matters? The language of a warm welcome transcends any barrier. My girlfriend told me all about you. Come in. I allow the good doctor into my home while locking the door behind us. To her credit, Yui was a really convenient house guest who left her spotless shoes outside of the doors. Prefer that cultural tidbit to my old home's lesser muck to clean off. Oh? She quizzically whispered upon looking up at the roof of my container, frowned to herself like she had encountered a 100-piece puzzle and then stepped inside, hands grasping my doorknob in nauseating confusion like the Vietnam War OGs who always needed help scaling down the stairs at the nearby VA. Oh, it's very curiously sized? Could not figure out whether Yui was shocked, terrified, or thrilled the same way one would be if they stepped off a roller coaster. Tenderly pushing aside a solitary left sock from the couch's leftmost crevice, finally found it. Yui immediately lowered her case right in front of the couch and then took her seat. Staring out into the blank screen with a frown, yet another quizzical head tilt forming up, somehow looking both stupefied and bewildered at the same time. I had left Dr. Yui there for about 15 mics to pour some cheap Long Island iced tea. Homemade from ingredients I had bought off from Buc-ee's during last month's trip, could never really replicate the ones from Vegas yet. But I'm getting way closer. Sliding over a glass whose bottom was still covered in last week's alcoholic gunk, I made sure to motion for Yui to have a sip as we both sat down to stare at the empty TV. No hope in turning it on, even as Yui frowned her perfectly cut brows. Her compounds glancing towards the mess of old-school antennae I had never really bothered to untangle from newer cables from the brand-new TV box Hannah had bought. Wires had almost consumed this corner of the house as some snaked upwards to the radar antennae outside the container, and to the power lines below. One important wire leading to the dusty DVD player I used for re-watching the old laser discs Dad had borrowed me. There's a button, you know, fancy places like yours don't cater to retro tastes. I asked while getting up and flicking the plastic on button with an echoey click after brushing aside the Xbox controller. Then I picked up the remote from its drawer and headed back to the couch since I didn't want to upgrade to an all-digital setup. Times were always a-changing, but can't a nostalgic countryside gal stick to the classics? My folly. Yui hissed again with a chittering that left quite a raw aftertaste in my ears, weirdly ringing it a little, but that could just be from the tinnitus after helping out the boys back in the stand. The brainial box wasn't turned on. I tried to communicate since I saw the antennae, but it wasn't listening despite the reservoirs of charged electrons surging through. Yeah, dumbass Hannah forgot to switch off the socket again. Not everything is a Samsung smart fridge, you know? Why did I even spend so much on that? It's a good appliance, keeps my salads cold. Salads? Ha! Thought you were a sushi gal. I smacked Yui in the back whilst guffawing through the unearthly feeling of rigid carapace behind fine cloth and rubbery skin. Some part of Yui's spinal cords was definitely interlinked like the tracks of an Abrams tank with the sleekness of a cockroach's wing. You need some venison. Adds meat to your bones. Venison? What manner of meal is that? Just something that's real gnarly, not clean like your clothes. Yui tilts her head whilst keeping bizarre eyes on Fox News' latest reports on all the mysterious happenings on the woods. Latest anchorman has been yapping incessant about space lizards coming and ruining all American woods as they please. Interesting theory that was ruined only because they were correct about the woods being fiddled by an unknown force. What's wrong with my clothes? You came to the middle of Nevada, gal. Ankle deep in Paiute country where the plains are so dusty that grains of sand stick to you like the buzzards of my namesake. Only way you could stay this clean is as if you came down from a damned flying saucer. I don't know what you're talking about. I just came from home. The ringing in my ears and the chittering again. No shock this time. Maybe just a morsel of panic. Panic at me? Nah, I'm just a wash-up country hero who spends her days babysitting dumbfuck tourists in the woods. Panic at greater forces? More inclined to believe that. But it was a strangely welcome thought to be feared for once. Home? Not a single speck of dust on your boots, nor any sign of vehicle transmission? No trucks? Don't see you with any tickets nor passport either. I smirked knowingly like I was laying down a bad hand after getting old Smithy to fold last week. Gal, you must have thought that I was born yesterday. Yui winced, panicking like a scared rescue as she quickly reached for her brown doctor's bag, clutching it tightly until she finds her notebook to leaf through all the wayward multicolored spirals scribbled within. Shit that made my head hurt like I was playing an old arcade game with them spaceships and the Fed conspiracy. Relax. If I cared about persecuting every illegal I meet on patrol, my truck would be full all the time. It's okay. I came here by aircraft, Yui shouted, a buzzing cacophony's worth of flies screaming from behind that pale throat as a sense of sheer panic drifted underneath my tongue. Huh. Tastes like the first bite of datura. Now that was something truly eldritch. Something I hope never to try outside of rituals. Of course you came from an aircraft. What about your home? The television flickered offline with the brief flash of a pale white planet, whose sterile ground was decorated by sprawling, gloomy cities of 40,000 styled hive sprawl that reared straight up into its lower atmosphere, their spires barely reaching the lower columns of grand altars to the vast depths of inhumane In the sky, Yui yelled again, the television's antennae letting out a teeny crackle of gloomy purple electric blue lighting as its antennae warped itself much like a peeling banana. The chattering came back with a vengeance, as if a hurling, screaming display of fear masked beneath a threat display as I leaned back and laughed. If I was some pasty intellectual from the Bayside cities and their quirky universities, I would have been spewing my guts in terror of such an ominous intruder. Such an obvious invader from quite possibly a distant world, just barging into my home, but I had seen it all before on deployment. That man with a pierced earlobe whom we had to screen on Checkpoint Romeo after we remembered that locals don't go about their business with such body mods. Poor guy was screeching so hard that he was born in San Fran as an American with rights, partially hoping that the raw desperation in his voice would convince us of his innocence, yet not wanting to just break down and beg in front of his waiting insurgent buddies. Fear and desperation masked behind a whirlwind of vulgar threats. Never knew what happened to him after I drove him off back to our fob. Sure hope he ain't doing so good since there are few reasons why a man from home would end up deep in the stand. He wasn't one of our guys, sure as shit ain't an aid worker either. Leaves either a Taliban sympathizer or a journo. And we sure as shit saw no press that day. Didn't bother asking the spooks. That why I ain't afraid. Just sat next to Yui until she cooled down from her little meltdown, and we continued watching TV as the night went on. Fox got too fanciful for my taste, so we swapped to some videos of Paiute history from the local museum's YouTube channel. Watching that made me think of how I survived those longer nights out in the stand. A desert was still a desert, right? No matter the plains of home nor the burning sands out there. Shit, a real intellectual can prosy on and on about the varied differences of biodiversity, humidity, and cultural behaviors, which I get it. I wrote such essays for my classes in university. But once you understand that a pickup truck driving, bearded man with a gun and a blessing from God was still the same no matter where they were on Earth, you're a quarter done to obtaining all you needed to know to survive. Anything more knowledge was just unnecessary. And shit. Like? What was the actual difference from people like Yui and Hannah? Both of them are aloof nerds with dark hair from strange worlds so very far away from flyover America. Yet it was Hannah, the human woman rather than the possible extraterrestrial who'd be more likely to get weird stares while walking down the hood near Vegas. Gotta have to cooperate to fix what's happening to the res. Alien or foreigner ain't no different once you think down the right mental ladders. Both deserve hospitality no matter what they are. So we both sat there and watched history and relaxed until the sun came up. It was fine, really. We needed all the chill before the pain really starts. Do you remember ritual creepypastas? I'm sure they're still around, but they were popular back in the day. I'm sure if you were in creepy story circles in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you will know what I'm talking about. Most of them were terrible. I don't know why they got so popular. I guess the format was easy to copy. One of the fun offshoots of these stories were people recounting their experiences of attempting these rituals, trying to make contact with anything paranormal. If they were honest, nothing ever happened. They wasted an evening sitting in a dark room waiting for a ghost that never existed to show up. If they weren't being honest, they would regale anyone who listened about how they truly made contact with something, showcasing proof in the form of claw marks or knowledge of future events that never came to be. It was all fake and everyone knew it, but it was fun. There was one particular ritual creepypasta that I am desperately looking for that got popular on X for a few weeks and then completely vanished. It spanned multiple posts and included images and diagrams on how to precisely perform the ritual. It was called Drive to Find or something like that, and there was a good bit more effort put into it than most other pastas of the same type. The OP of the thread dutifully answered questions in their initial thread, clarifying confusing bits, and then vanished once the thread died. As usual, the original thread, along with its pictures and clarifications, were copied, which gave it more exposure and interest. This inevitably led to people attempting the ritual. Every single person that posted about their experience explained that they tapped into something that changed them in extraordinary ways. These were different from most of the ritual attempt stories I have read. They were all filled with awe and fear. It piqued my interest. It was winter in 2009. My friend Jack had just gotten his license. He was recently gifted his dad's old shitbox Camry, and he was itching to do something with his newfound freedom. We were talking over Steam over what we could do in our small town in South Carolina on a Friday night. The answer was not much. Jack's response was to just ride around and possibly see if there was a gas station that had let him buy beer. He looked a bit older than 16, but there was no way in hell he wouldn't have gotten carded. I was a year younger and still a rule follower, so the idea made me uneasy. I, as I usually did at the time, brought up my interest in creepypasta. Why don't we try the Drive to Find creepypasta? What? It's this new creepypasta I read on /x/ a few days ago. Basically, you do a bunch of shit, then you start driving around until you find a house that doesn't exist. I'm sure it's BS, but could be fun. LOL, dude, that sounds dumb as hell. Sounds better than getting arrested for trying to get beer, IMO. I sent him the story over Steam after that. I wasn't being serious, but I wasn't fully being not serious. Plus, this story was unique in the sense that it required two people. Most of the ritual creepypastas I read were written for individuals. I had a folder on my old PC that contained a ton of these stories, Drive to Find being one of them. I would love to find that folder again because I can't find any evidence that this story existed. I will recount the parts that I can remember. There was a series of markings you had to write on a mirror with charcoal, and then burn a candle at the tips of each marking. This weakened the barrier between worlds and allowed you the ability to glimpse the between sides. Once this was done, you needed to rinse the mirror off into a container, and then boil all of the water out. The small ash at the bottom of the pot would then be smeared over your eyelids. This is what gave you the sight. Once both people involved in the ritual do that, one person designates themselves the lurker, and the other becomes the seeker. The lurker's job is to blindly guide the seeker around by any means, by foot, car, etc., and the seeker's job is to, simply put, seek. The seeker cannot guide themselves to their destination, as they will always feel certain they are on the right path. The lurker will not know the path, and not knowing will make it easier to find. You both have to say to the now clean mirror what your job is, along with some other important sounding nonsense to seal the deal. Once the role declarations are made, the seeker should feel this sense that they are on the cusp of finding something. From there, the lurker guides the seeker by taking them to random spots, completely ignoring any kind of intuition or direction given by the seeker. The only way to the correct destination comes from not doing anything the seeker says. The seeker will never claim to have found the place they are looking for, and it is up to the lurker to verify that the location has been found. At that point, you approach the house, the barn, the porta-potty, whatever it is. It could be any kind of building with a door, and you have to physically force the door open by any means. Once you bust the door open, you will be met with a black void. You are not supposed to enter it, no matter what it entices you with. You can shout a demand into the void, and it will either grant it, pull you in, or both. Jack didn't reply back for a bit. I assumed he thought it was stupid and was going to ghost me for the rest of the night, only returning the next day acting like he never did. I've known Jack since the 3rd grade. We used to live on the same street for years until he and his dad moved to Easley. We had begun growing apart for the past few years. I had become a major computer nerd, and basically lived online. Jack was out getting his life started. He was going to begin applying for jobs in January at the stern request of his dad. Gaming was keeping us in touch, however. We had been heavy on Team Fortress 2 for most of 2009. To my surprise, he replied, "Hey, fuck it, why not? We'll do this, and you can't complain if I lurk us straight to a gas station, LOL." It was flippant, but that's what I've come to expect from Jack. I know that his ultimate goal was going to end us up at the Stop a Minute, where there has been whispers of a certain employee not checking IDs, and then we'd be back at my place playing TF2 or Counter-Strike while buzzed. My mom was going to be working well into the night, and I never had a dad, so my house was the perfect place to do some underage drinking. About half an hour later, Jack showed up. I had already begun getting everything put together. I had the pot on the stove ready to roll, and had grabbed a circular hallway mirror that had been there since before I was alive. There was also something with fragrances that I can't remember. Jack had brought over an orange, and I had some bleach, among other things. You needed to create a cloying and powerful smell for this ritual. In the kitchen, we got everything set up. I began the ritual by reciting the lines on the creepypasta page I printed out, and referenced it as I went through the steps. Jack stood there, his arms crossed, looking bemused as I went through the process. I felt a little silly, yet excited as I performed the steps. Jack never said anything, just crossed his arms and smirked. He was checked out, but he didn't make a mockery of the process. Jack was a great friend. He had no need to indulge me in this stupid little lark, but he did. I think he knew how badly I wanted to attempt one of these things at least once. I was an insufferable nerd and would bring this stuff up whenever I had the chance. The end of the night in his mind was going to be the two of us drunkenly playing Team Fortress 2 together. When we got to the point of placing the candle flames on the tips of the 2 markings that needed to be made, we both had to do it. We both grabbed a long candle that had also been sitting as decoration in a dusty candle holder for as long as I can remember, lit them on the stove, and each burned the tips of the charcoal marking in a very specific order. Me first, and then Jack. As we did this, I began to feel a bit strange. I felt dizzy but had my full bearings, if that makes sense. Jack started to feel it as well. "Sam, I feel weird." "Yeah, man, me too." "Gotta be this bleach shit, it's burning my eyes." "Yeah, you're probably onto something." The mixture of bleach, fresh oranges, pine sol, and some other cleaners in a big bowl I had mixed together and placed on the counter beside us was extremely noxious. Jack had a point. We powered through the rest of the candle burning and snuffed them out. I recall there was something specific you had to do while extinguishing the flame, but cannot for the life of me remember exactly what it was. After that, I got a bottle of water, poured it on the mirror, and wiped all the smudges up with my hand. I then poured the black liquid into an already boiling pan of water we had on the stove. We went to my room to play some games while waiting for the pot to boil away. It didn't take too long. All said, this whole deal took about 45 minutes. It wasn't even 7 o'clock yet. While we were waiting, Jack got the name of the stop-a-minute attendant that was known to have loose morals from a friend of his. I still felt odd, even after being away from the kitchen for a good few minutes. I didn't bring it up. Jack said, "Well, beer or not, we don't have to worry about a hangover because that shit in the kitchen is already guaranteed a fucking headache. Did you have to make it that strong?" Hey, it said to create a powerful, noxious odor that filled the air, and recommended bleach or citrus and garlic. I was just following the thing. I don't think it's the... A flash shot across my vision. It was thousands of glimpses of buildings along with their smells and sounds all at once. My senses, for that brief flash, felt subsumed for ages. It felt like no time and all time had passed all at once. Among the many, many other visions, I saw what appeared to be an old, run-down 7-Eleven. The words on the signs were all wrong. There was a smell of burning hair and blood, an image of a church that had burned down, but the doors still stood strong. A one-story family home made of brick that was completely derelict and sad. The sounds of a single person singing happy birthday. A police station wrapped up in tape. Red and blue lights strobing against the building. I could literally go on for days. When I came to and looked at Jack, he was looking at me, pale as a ghost. I said, "Did you just..." "Yeah, I saw. Let's just go check on that pot. The sooner we can pour out that bleach shit, the better," Jack said with a nervous energy. He was still blaming the fumes from the cleaning supplies, but I think we both knew that wasn't the case. We got into the kitchen to find the water was completely boiled out of the pot, leaving a small amount of soot at the bottom of the pan. I turned the burner off, and Jack grabbed the bowl I had placed on the counter, took it outside, and poured it out in the yard. I saw him take a look at the bowl, think for a second, and drop the bowl beside the biohazard he poured on the ground. I can't remember if the instructions specifically said you could do that at this point, but I was too freaked out to care. When Jack came back in, I said, "Look, man, this is stupid. We should just clean this shit up and call it a day." I was scared. I got my glimpse of something paranormal, and I had my fill. Jack looked at me, his eyes almost tearing through me as he spoke. "No, Sam. We already got this far. Let's just do the eyeliner thing and say what we need to say. And then when nothing happens, we can go get wasted and put this shit behind us." He was completely different than he was earlier. He was animated and extremely pushy about continuing. "Jack, did you see it No, I didn't see a goddamn thing, Sam. This is all fucking bullshit. Hurry up and put this shit on your eyelids and say the thing. I'm the lurker, you're the seeker." "But, I don't know. I don't think I want to do this anymore." My head was starting to spin. Every alarm bell in my body was telling me to run. "Look, I don't know what you saw, but it wasn't anything. The only way you can prove this is all bullshit is by finishing this. When we're done and we're just standing here like nerds with shit all over our faces, we can go on and forget any of this ever happened." This went on for a few minutes. I tried to share some of what I saw, the absolute fucking depth of it, but he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't say that he saw anything either. Jack was a man on a mission at this point. He threatened to do it alone, make himself the seeker just to prove that I was being a little bitch about it. The instructions state several times to not do this. It never said why, of course. At this point, I was enough of a believer to take that as a threat. And when he started rubbing the soot on his eyelids, I ran up and started doing the same. "You're a real motherfucker, dude," I said as I rubbed my index finger caked in ash over my eyelid, taking care to not get any in my eye. "Hey man, I gotta show you that whatever that was bullshit. You'll never live this shit down." Jack smirked. "Now let's get this over with." We both stared into the small hallway mirror and both began saying our own separate pledges. Mine was a compact with what lives in between worlds to never stop seeking until it is found. Jack's was a pledge to help the seeker find his way by rendering his pleas dumb and deaf. An air of extreme seriousness filled the room. My heart was pounding. None of this felt fun anymore. It felt like I had stumbled into a world that I should have stayed well far away from. Then we were both done. Nothing happened. I stood there for a minute. I could feel my face getting flush with embarrassment. Jack laughed, almost in triumph, and clapped my shoulder. "See, Sam, what did I tell you? I'm gonna wash this shit off now." Jack approached the sink. I let out a sigh, half relief, half disappointment. "Yeah, man, this whole thing was a waste of time." I laughed. "Got the need to do this shit out of my system, though." "That's good, maybe we can do normal shit next Friday." Jack splashed some water on his face. "Hey, where do you keep your dish soap?" "Oh, it's..." I trailed off. "Sam?" "The dish soap, dish soap, dish soap, dish soap. I know where it is. I know exactly where it is, but I couldn't place it. It was everywhere and nowhere all at once, and I felt like I knew exactly where it was, but couldn't say. It's, I started frantically opening cabinets, looking in the fridge, the oven, throwing utensils and pans out on the floor. "I know where it is, Jack. I know exactly where it is. It's... Jack stared at me. His terror couldn't be hidden. "Sam, your eyes. What the fuck, dude?" Apparently my pupils were completely dilated. I was drooling and spinning in place, completely frantic about the dish soap. Jack looked around at all the cabinets I had opened and noticed the only door I left closed was under the sink. He opened the cabinet, and there sat a half-empty bottle of Dawn. As soon as I saw the soap, my thoughts regained composure, and I stood there, slack-jawed. There was a solid beat of silence, complete unbelief at what just happened, but the mess around us betrayed the truth. Jack broke the silence. "Sam, what did we do?" My voice was much shakier than I had thought, a mix of fear and adrenaline. "I don't know, man, but I'm starting to feel weird. There's somewhere I gotta be. I gotta go there now. I know exactly where it is, but I don't know. I have no fucking idea what's happening to me, Jack." Jack approached me. "I'm feeling weird too, dude. I gotta take you there. I don't think I can do anything else until we get there." He had a very serious, haunted look on his face. "What did you see, Jack? Earlier, I mean, what did you see?" "I saw nothing. Come on, let's go." And with that, within 5 minutes of the conclusion of the ritual, we were off. Nothing else mattered. Neither of us even shut off the sink faucet. It is extremely difficult to convey this feeling I had. I felt so sure of myself, and endlessly lost. I wish I knew what Jack was feeling. He had this frantic energy about him that was so unlike how he normally acted. Jack began driving around town through the neighborhoods. I was a pure menace the entire time. I physically could not shut up. I was chattering and shouting and waving my arms, threatening to take the wheel and drive myself. Jack was going the wrong way. I knew for a pure fact that every turn he made was wrong, and I got angrier each time he made a wrong move. "No, no, 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 you motherfucker. I said right. Turn fucking right at that stoplight. Are you not listening to me? Are you fucking dumb? I need to get there now, and you're fucking me. You're fucking us." I was spitting and angry, trying desperately to convince Jack to take my direction. I knew in the back of my mind that he was doing exactly what he needed to, yet I couldn't help it. Jack tried a few times to reason with me, but eventually went quiet and drove, ignoring me as I screamed. This went on for a very, very long time. I want to say we were out for 5 or 6 hours, but it had to have been much shorter than that. My mouth was dry, my voice hoarse, but I just kept going. Eventually, I began berating Jack for getting us so lost, that our surroundings were unrecognizable. The amount of turns and back roads put us in an area that I knew neither of us had any clue about. "You fucking bastard, look at what you've done. We are so lost. We can't even make it back." Jack started slowing down the car to a stop. I saw what caught his eye as well. There was a gravel driveway off from the road leading to a normal-looking house for this area. It looked to be old, a little run down, but still livable. It had peeling yellow paint and a tarp covering what I assumed would be a broken window on the porch. The porch appeared to be slightly cluttered. A hanging bulb illuminated the entrance. The oddest thing about this house wasn't what it looked like, it's where it was. It appeared to have been cut into the earth instead of built into it. It's hard to explain. The edges didn't feel right. The shadows coming from the front porch and the moon overhead appeared off as well. Even in my furious state, I couldn't help but notice it. There was a moment of quiet, the only sounds being the wheezing of the engine that has for sure been ran harder than it has in years. Jack asked, "Is this the place, Sam?" "Well, I don't think. No, we have to keep going down this road." With that, Jack slowly pulled into the gravel driveway without another word. I felt anger for a second, but it quickly began to wash away. Whatever fever I had been put under had broke as soon as Jack parked the car and turned off the engine. My voice, hoarse from all of the screaming I had done, my throat dry as a bone, choked out, "Dude, I'm so sorry, I have no idea what the fuck that was." "It's fine. All part of this game, right?" Jack's eyes were dark. He seemed incredibly serious. Yeah, I guess so." I had managed to scrounge up an old half-drank bottle of water from the back seat. I chugged it. "All right, let's go get what we came for." Jack stepped out of the car. I followed right behind him. I had an initial wave of trepidation over going to somebody's door at what had to be 3 in the morning, but the way we got here made me feel fairly certain nobody would be waiting for us. I looked around when we stepped on the porch. All of the empty soda cans, all of the tools were old. I couldn't tell the time period exactly, but all of it seemed older than I was. 80s, maybe even around the 70s. It felt like this house was suddenly abandoned one day decades ago, and never touched again. Before I had the chance to say anything, Jack was already trying to open the door. He jiggled the knob, and it was locked, of course. The door looked solid and sturdy. It appeared to be a solid slab of wood painted red that was completely flat, save for the knob and deadbolt. I tried to look through the windows on the porch, but there were thick curtains drawn over it. Couldn't see a thing inside. Jack started looking around the piles of tools sitting on top of and under a big homemade table that appeared to have been made with old deck boards and cinder blocks. I just now noticed how musty the place smelled. My heart skipped a beat when I felt like I recognized the smell. I couldn't hold that thought for long, as it was followed by a loud crash that startled me even further. I jumped back. Jack had grabbed a shovel and began wailing on the door. Jack, what the fuck, dude? This is what we got to do, right? To get in there, to get what we want, we came here to do this, Sam." Jack explained between swings through gritted teeth. "Well, yeah, but you could have fucking warned me." Jack said nothing. He swung the shovel about a dozen more times before he dropped it, and dropped to the floor panting. That's when I noticed he had tears running down his face. "Dude, what's up?" "I can get Cindy back, Sam." He looked up at me, quickly wiping his tears away. "I can get Cindy back." Cindy was Jack's older sister. The three of us played together all the time when we lived on the same street. It was a few years before, on one of the many beautiful early spring days in 2000. I was 6, Jack was 7, and Cindy was 9. It was afternoon, the sun was just starting to set, it would be time to go home soon. We were out in some woods close to my house exploring, as we always did. The subject came up about building a treehouse. We all had the best ideas, how there'd be a place to play Nintendo, and a full kitchen and bathroom, so we'd have our own place to live without any chores or rules. You know, just fun kid shit. Cindy had climbed a big tree that she claimed was perfect for a treehouse. Jack went up after her, and I began to follow suit. At some point, the two began bickering over something. Nothing at all important. Probably a disagreement over where the beds would go or what snacks would be stocked. Some meaningless drivel that I would have completely forgotten had the following not happened. Standing on the branch, Jack pushed Cindy. She fell, screaming the entire way. I never saw her body, but I heard every sound as I clung to the tree in shock. Jack saw the entire event. She sliced her throat on a branch or something on the way down, and she moaned in agony as she drowned in her own blood. Her guttural attempts at screaming slowly died down into a breathy chuffing noise until there was no sound at all. I got down from the tree and ran home, scared but not quite able to process what just happened. I told them Cindy got hurt. My mom and Jack and Cindy's parents and probably some others ran out to the woods. Apparently Jack was still standing on the branch, frozen in shock. Firefighters had to come and get him down. He was catatonic for days after. Jack's mom never forgave him. She abandoned the family and went to live in Texas or something. His dad tried in some capacity, but that sort of pain can't ever truly be healed. He became strict, parenting Jack in a way that felt like it was a punishment for what he did. He only got the Camry and was made to get his driver's license as soon as possible, so he could get a job and move out as soon as possible. Entire lives changed forever over one bad move. I'm assuming, because Jack never told me, that he was shown in some way that doing this could somehow let him get his sister back. To possibly undo that argument that occurred 9 years back, that butterfly affected his entire family to ruin. I said I don't think that would, but stopped myself. What was I about to say? That there's no way to bring back the dead, no way to go back in time? We were currently standing on the porch of a house cut out of time that I am fairly certain was not there. Who was I to say what could or couldn't be done at this point? Instead, I said, We're gonna need to get something stronger to bust in, dude. Jack looked up at me and smiled. I pulled him to his feet and he pulled me into a hug. Thanks, Sam. This is gonna work. This will work. I was incredibly awkward and didn't quite know how to respond to this, so I just said, okay, broke the embrace and started looking around the porch. We bashed on the door with a hammer, pried at the hinges with a crowbar with no luck. Jack threw the hammer at one of the windows in frustration, and it bounced off like it hit a mound of rubber. We started searching around the property, and I found an old, rusted axe sitting at the base of a tree. When I turned around to shout to Jack that I found something useful, I noticed the entire house was flickering. It was going in a strobe-like pattern, existing in that space and then not. I stormed towards the house, and as soon as I touched it, the flickering stopped. I couldn't find anything in the back. We should have prepared. Jack was yelling this at me as he walked back to the porch. He must have seen the look of shock in my eyes. What the fuck happened, Sam? House almost vanished. We shouldn't leave it until we are done. What, that's okay? Jack was about to tell me I was being preposterous and caught himself. We both took turns wailing on the door with the axe. We celebrated as splinters came off the door. I knocked off the doorknob with the backside of the axe. Eventually, we had gotten to a point where there was some good damage done to the section surrounding the locks. Jack dropped the axe. All right, stand back. Jack kicked the door 3 solid times, paused, and tried again. After the 4th kick, there was a solid splintering noise, and the door flew open. We both stood there speechless. It wasn't a pure black void like the story said. It was full of stars. A blanket of the deepest black a human eye can comprehend, sprinkled with the brightest thing imaginable. Clouds of purple moved slowly across the endless expanse. A deep hum resonated and made my teeth feel weird. The hum began to resemble speech. It wasn't out loud, but in my head. Come in. Come in and see everything you've ever wanted to see, every question answered. It felt enticing. I even felt my feet start to step forward, but I stopped. I said, Jack, don't forget, we can't go in no matter what. Is there a God? How did this all come to be? You want to know? Step into the seam and become knowledge. I ignored it, tried to. I had to shout my desire into the void, only I didn't have anything planned. I can't believe I came all this way without anything on my mind, so I said the first thing I could think of. It was a stupid, selfish request. I breathed in deep and shouted, I want to live forever. The purple clouds inside the void lit up and stirred around slightly. You can live longer than forever if you come in, filled my head. I rubbed my face. My nose was bleeding. Tears were streaming down Jack's face. He hadn't uttered a word. I roused him from whatever trance he was in. Jack, say your piece and let's fucking go. I want Cindy back. I want Cindy to be alive again. I want what happened to her on March 12th, 2000 to have never happened. The purple clouds shifted, the soothing voice in my head enticing me, begging me to come closer. Jack's mouth dropped open. His nose started bleeding as well. The voice in my head was becoming too much to bear. Let's go, Jack, come on. I need to go in to save her. I need to walk her out of this place. Jack began approaching the threshold of the door. Jack! I grabbed his shirt and pulled him back. The voice got louder and more frantic. Jack has made the right choice. He's coming in to enjoy the pleasures of eternity. Join him. Join him. Join him. Join him. Join him. Jack fought me off and pushed me to the ground. I'm going in there, Sam. If you try to stop me, I'll beat the shit out of you. I stood up and wanted so desperately to say something like, then start fighting, Jack, and find some way to pull him off the porch and away from here, but all I could manage was a meager burg. My head was spinning and ringing from whatever was trying to get me come in. My body was starting to ache, and my nose was filled with blood. All I could do at that point was watch Jack as he gave me one last mournful glare. He then turned around and walked through the doorway. It was an insane thing to witness. As Jack walked through, that part of him disappeared. He didn't go into the space past the door, but merely vanished as he walked. His head and arms vanished, and his body slowly evaporated into nothing as he continued, until finally, all that was left was a disembodied foot that pulled itself through the doorframe. I had no time to react. The voice was begging me to come in after Jack, to witness the beauty of what he is now experiencing. I turned around and ran off the porch, the voice not getting any lower. It pleaded with me to return, promised that I could be a god in my own universe, that I could change anything I wanted to, if I would just go inside. I ran the opposite direction, feeling like absolute hell. I ran until the voice abruptly cut off. My vision was still blurry, head pounding. I turned around, the house was gone. I walked down the back road for a few minutes. I grabbed some napkins out of the Camry and cleaned myself up as best as I could. I couldn't drive out of there. Jack took the key with him wherever he went. I managed to catch a good Samaritan out driving around with his girlfriend, who were helpful enough to drive me to a gas station within walking distance to my house. I was shocked to find out we were only 15 minutes away from it. It felt like we had been driving around for hours. They asked me what I was doing out. I lied and said I had been driving around to clear my head and my car broke down. The couple dropped me off. They gave me their names, but I can't for the life of me remember them. I then took the 10-minute walk back to my house. The first thing I did when I got in was take an OxyContin that my mom had gotten for a wisdom tooth removal. They gave you a bunch of pills back then, so there were a good few left over after she had healed. I then cleaned up the kitchen real quick because we had left it a mess. Mom would have flipped her shit if she got home and saw this, but then I realized she should have been home a long time ago. I looked at the clock on the microwave and felt so nauseous I almost threw up. It was only 7:45. I went to bed and tried to sleep, but it didn't happen. I couldn't imagine what the next day was going to be like, having to explain to Jack's dad what happened. What could I possibly say? I was racked with guilt. This was my fault. I saw this stupid story online and in my childishness wanted to recreate it for no reason. It just so happened to have actually worked. That was another thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Who shared that story? How many of these things actually did what they claimed? The threads after of people sharing their experiences, were they all true? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I finally rolled out of bed at around 9 a.m., deciding that now was the time to tell a man that the only family he has left is gone. I made some coffee and stepped outside with it, to let some cool air hit my face and wake me up a little bit. I stood there for a few minutes, the throb in my head nothing but a dull ache now when I heard somebody call my name. "Hey Sam, oh God, you look like hell." I turned around and saw who spoke, dropping my arms and spilling what was left of the coffee on the ground. Cindy. All the breath had been sucked out of my body. It was her, Cindy. She had on a blue shirt and a pair of khakis and was about to step into a car. She was getting ready to head to a shift at Walmart. Are you okay? You're kind of freaking me out. Do I need to get somebody? Your dad. Cindy, I need to talk to your dad about Jack. Okay, he's in the house. Come on over. Cindy closed the door and walked away from the Camry that she was about to get into and walked up to her house. Their house they still lived in on my street. But you moved to Easley. I don't understand, I said weakly. Cindy's face had long since twisted into one of concern. Did you hit your head or something? She opened the door to the house they used to live in but now still live in and yelled, "Hey Dad, it's Sam. He wants to talk to you about Jack." She ran into the house real quick and hurriedly whispered something to him before she came running back out. "Okay, he's coming out. I gotta get to work. Hope you get to feeling better, Sam." And with that, Cindy ran off, got into the same Camry I spent last night screaming at her brother in and drove off. I was rubbing the coffee mug in my hand so hard I was afraid I was going to break it. Jack's dad came walking up to the door, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a telephone in the other. "Jesus, Sam, are you okay?" was the first thing he said to me. I hadn't showered or changed my clothes from the night before. My shirt had quite a bit more blood on the front of it than I had thought, and I looked considerably deranged. Cindy said, "You may have fallen or something. Do I need to call an ambulance?" "Richard, it's about Jack." I started to cry. "What?" I took in a deep breath and let out a massive sob. Jack's gone, Richard, and it's all my fault." I began to full-on sob. "I'm so fucking sorry. My God, it's all my fault." Sam. Richard steadied my shoulder with the same hand he was holding the phone. I took another breath and calmed down enough to look up at him. Richard then said, "Who the fuck is Jack?" I collapsed to the ground. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was Jack's mom walking out and looking over me, loudly telling Richard to dial 911. I was in the hospital for 3 days. They were convinced I had a seizure or a psychotic break. I was talking about my best friend named Jack, somebody who never existed apparently. Eventually I cottoned on and began pretending that he didn't exist either, feigning ignorance about the whole thing. Once they did some scans and saw I was normal, they sent me home. Mom was worried for a bit. But once I got back and I seemed okay, things just moved on. Jack was just gone. Any and all evidence that he was once alive now only exists in my memory. I watched old VHS tapes of myself as a child, ones I knew Jack were in and he wasn't. Life went on as normal, as if he were never there. It was so surreal piecing together my life, filling in the gaps of what happened during the times my best friend was supposed to be there. I cried in private, mourning somebody who hadn't ever existed for years. Then Jack started speaking to me. At first it was something I could ignore, chalk up to nerves or exhaustion. Over several weeks it got louder and more persistent. Basically, it's Jack's voice telling me that I need to enter the scene with him, that it was the greatest decision of his life. It was worth unbeing, Sam, so fucking worth it. You need to come in while the veil is weak and you have time. I haven't mentioned yet that there was a closing procedure that needed to be done by one of the people involved in the ritual to cut the connection made to the other side. I had completely forgot about it in the trauma of the weeks after I got back. I don't know why it took 15 years to start feeling the effects of not finishing the ritual. The original creepypasta mentioned how certain star and planet alignments would affect your success rate of getting your wish granted, so maybe something like that. I am hoping beyond hope that writing this story will have spurred a memory for somebody reading it, that they have some old folder on a hard drive of ancient creepypastas saved from the web, and the drive to find creepypasta is among them. I desperately need the guide so I can finish this. Every day gets worse. I see Jack out of the corner of my eye sometimes. He looks exactly the same as he did the day he vanished in 2009. He is just standing there staring at me with a serious look on his face. Once I move my eyes toward him, he vanishes. On that note, I look the exact same as well. I am 30 now and have not aged a day past 15. Will I truly live forever? I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to survive another month with how things are progressing. My dreams recently have been of Jack. He's naked and surrounded in dazzling purple flame, his eyes burning flames as well. He speaks in a crackling loud voice as if thunder had been given the ability to talk. You seek, I lurk. Seek the door, seek the seam. I'm then given glimpses of an untold number of buildings that seem to span on for forever, but in an instant. A Waffle House with all of its windows smashed, black smoke pouring out from them. A storage shed in somebody's backyard, old blood covering the door. The sweet sick stench of a nursing home, room 2103's door is shut tight. On and on and on and on. I wake up, covered in sweat, feeling like I know where I need to go but not knowing. Most concerning, however, is a door in my house has become impossible to open. It's the door that leads to a small utility closet that holds my water heater and a shelf. I have an urge to bust through it. The temptation grows every day. I found myself idly walking into a neighbor's backyard and grabbing a sledgehammer they had left sitting in their garage. I dropped it and ran back to my house, hoping nobody saw me. If I do break the door open, and I am once again faced with the endless, brain-defying void that I saw back in 2009. Could I simply ask that it ends? That the ritual be over? It may not listen. It may pull me inside like it did with Jack. I'm spending all of my free time searching for the original creepypasta so I can hopefully end this before it comes to that. I woke up last night in a daze, standing in front of the utility room door with the neighbor's sledgehammer. I'm afraid the temptation to bust open this door will become something I won't be able to stop. Please share anything you remember about the creepypasta. I'm afraid I won't have much time left before I do something drastic. If I do end up busting this door open and it is what I'm afraid of and it pulls me in as well, hopefully this will stay online. My name is Samuel Grady. I exist and am a person. Jack Thomas existed and was a person. He was my best friend. New Year's Eve has always been my favorite holiday. There's something magical about counting down the seconds to a fresh start while the world seems to hold its breath. This year I spent it with my friends at Brianna's apartment, a cozy dim space strung with fairy lights and half-empty glasses of champagne. We alternated between shouting song lyrics and scrolling through Blinksy, basically with our phones stuck to our hands. I'm not just a casual Blinksier. I've got a following, a decent one. People like my quick cuts, trendy dances, and my knack for jumping on viral sounds before they blow up. My friends roll their eyes whenever I whip out my phone to film, but it's all part of the routine. As the countdown to midnight began, I filmed everything. Brianna was popping confetti cannons. Trevor was horribly failing at his attempts at spraying champagne, and we screamed into the new year like lunatics. My followers ate it up. "Last one of the night," I said, holding my phone at arm's length to capture the perfect angle. Behind me, the room buzzed with laughter and music. The Blinksy algorithm worked its magic, and within minutes, my notifications were blowing up with likes and comments. The rush I got was a mixture of validation and pride. But as the clock struck 12 and the fireworks outside faded, something changed. "Check your comments," Brianna called from across the room, her face illuminated by her phone. I assumed it was another joke about my FYP obsession. I scrolled through the flood of comments, most of them the usual. Fire emojis, queen, mood, but scattered between them were stranger ones. "Who's that behind you? Creepy AF? Is this a prank or?" Confused, I replayed the video. The camera panned across my friends where their faces glowed under the string lights, then settled on me. At first it seemed normal, but in the corner of the frame near the hallway leading to Brianna's bedroom there was someone. A shadowy figure, blurry and indistinct, almost like a glitch in the video. "Did you see that?" I asked as I showed Brianna and Trevor. They squinted at the screen and laughed. "It's probably just compression or whatever," Trevor said. "Doesn't Blinksy mess with quality sometimes?" Brianna nodded but looked uneasy and said, "Yeah, maybe it's a smudge on the lens or something." I tried to shake it off, but the more I stared, the less it looked like a glitch. The outline of the figure seemed deliberate. A chill ran down my spine, but I laughed it off and said, "Guess the algorithm loves a little mystery." But as the night wore on and my notifications continued to blow up, the comments got weirder. "It's moving closer. I just rewatched. What the hell is that? Don't look behind you." After that, and reading those disturbing yet very real comments, I didn't sleep that night. New Year's Day arrived with an unease I couldn't shake. The sunlight filtering through my bedroom blinds would have felt warm and promising, but felt cold. Sterile. Maybe it was the hangover, or maybe it was the Blinksy comments that haunted me through the night. I rolled over and grabbed my phone, sluggish but eager to confirm if what I saw the night before was real. The first video on my feed wasn't mine. It was a grainy, low-quality clip of an empty house. Its windows were boarded up and the door hung halfway off its hinges. The audio crackled with a faint, distorted hum, almost like a voice trying to speak through static. Beneath it, the caption read "Nightmare." I scrolled past it, trying to ignore the growing pit in my stomach, and opened my own profile. The New Year's Eve post was still blowing up at over 30,000 views. The comments section, though, was disturbing. "Does anyone else see it getting closer in every upload?" someone asked. "Girl, take this down. This is bad energy," said another. The last comment I hastily glanced over said, "This isn't a joke. Stop filming." I hesitated before pressing play on the video again. At first glance, it seemed the same as from the night before, the blurry figure still hovering in the background. But when I replayed it for the third time, my heart stopped. The figure wasn't just standing in the hallway, it had moved. Slightly, just enough to snag my focus. Its outline was sharper and the features of its face were barely discernible. My phone buzzed in my hand, causing me to flinch. A DM notification. The sender's username was just a bunch of random letters and numbers, and the message hit me like ice water. "You're famous to me. I'm closer than you think." The screenshot attached had my heart racing. It was a photo of my bedroom window taken from outside. I flew out of bed and pulled the curtains closed with trembling hands. Panting and gasping, I turned back to my phone, trying to find an explanation. Someone was messing with me. It had to have been a prank, but who? Brianna? Trevor? They weren't the type to go this far. Panicking, I called Brianna, hoping she'd pick up. "Hey, did you send me a weird message just now?" I tried to sound calm, but my voice cracked halfway through. "What? No," she said, her tone groggy. "Why would I? What's going on?" I hesitated, feeling foolish for even asking. "Nothing. Never mind." I hung up before she could press further. For the entire day, I couldn't stop refreshing my feed. More nightmare videos popped up, each creepier than the last. They all had the same eerie atmosphere, flickering lights, distant footsteps, faint layered whispers. That night, as I lay in bed scrolling, the notifications started again. My followers were tagging me in videos I didn't recognize. They showed me sitting in my room staring blankly at my phone, but I hadn't filmed them. At least I didn't think I had. The next morning I woke up to a fresh wave of dread. My phone buzzed incessantly, lighting up with notifications from Blinksy. As I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I realized it wasn't normal engagement. These were tags, dozens of them. When I opened the app, my stomach twisted. People had stitched my New Year's Eve post, adding their own terrified commentary. Some zoomed in on the blurry figure in the background, pointing out how it appeared clearer than before. Others uploaded clips of their own Blinksies, altered to include the same shadowy figure. One user's video hit me the hardest. It was a split screen, my video on top and theirs on the bottom. In mine, the figure loomed faintly in the background. In theirs, it was standing at the edge of their bed, completely still. Its outline was jagged, like static carved into human form. My hands shook as I scrolled through the comments. They were all the same. One said, "What is this thing?" "It showed up in my video too," someone else claimed. Someone even went as far to blame me by saying, "River, stop posting. You're making it worse." I threw my phone onto the bed and paced the room. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Maybe someone hacked my account, edited the videos, and tricked other people into doing the same. But the fear in their voices, it wasn't staged. I snatched my phone, deciding to confront it head-on. My notifications had piled up even more, but one stood out. A video sent directly to me. The username was hidden, replaced by a simple, chilling label, anonymous. The video was a low-angle shot of my house. My stomach dropped when I recognized the glowing string lights in my bedroom window. The camera zoomed in slowly, shakily, until it rested on me. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling. The timestamp in the corner read 12:23 a.m., the night before. I never felt watched. I never heard anything. My skin crawled as I rewound the video, hoping I'd somehow misinterpreted it. But no, it was me, completely oblivious. The captions below the video made my blood run cold. "We're closer now. This is just the beginning." Tears stung my eyes as I slammed my phone onto my desk. I felt cornered, trapped by something I couldn't see. But I couldn't just ignore it, not when it was clearly spreading to other people. My FYP spiraled deeper into chaos, showing videos tagged nightmare. Each post felt like a glimpse into hell. Distorted faces, abandoned streets, and faint whispers layered beneath the audio tracks. One Blinksy stood out from the rest. It was my video, the New Year's Eve post, but it had been edited. The figure was no longer blurry. It had moved closer to the camera, revealing a face, or what should have been a face. Instead, there was nothing but a blank, rippling void where features should have been. But that wasn't the worst part. The figure wasn't in my living room anymore. In the edited clip, it was standing outside my bedroom window, right where I was. By the time night fell, Blinksy wasn't just a social media app anymore. It was a full-blown horror show. My FYP had morphed into something unrecognizable. Every scroll felt like diving deeper into a void. Some tags were new clips from terrified users claiming to see the same figure. Others were stitched versions of my own posts, all distorted in ways that made my skin crawl. The figure was no longer just a blurry anomaly in the background. In every repost, it moved closer, inching toward the camera with each new edit. Its movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, but deliberate. The thing wasn't just there, it was aware. What chilled me most was how far the nightmare trend had spread. Strangers on Blinksy were sharing videos of their experiences, claiming they'd seen the figure in their own homes. Some thought it was a brilliant prank or an elaborate ARG. Others weren't so sure. My heart sank as I stumbled upon a viral clip from a girl named Cassie. She sat cross-legged on her bed, tears streaming down her face as she spoke into the camera. "I don't know what's happening," she stammered. "It was in my mirror last night. I swear, it's not just a glitch. I don't feel safe anymore." The video cut to a stitched clip. It was an overhead shot of Cassie asleep in her bed. The figure stood at her bedside, unmoving, watching her. The person who stitched it captioned the video, "It's closer for her now." I slammed my phone onto the nightstand, too nauseous to keep watching. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to shut the app down for good. But curiosity, no obsession, had its claws in me. I needed answers. I needed this to stop. A notification buzzed, dragging me back to the screen. It was another anonymous video. My stomach dropped as I opened it. This one was taken inside my house. It started in my kitchen, the angle low and shaky, as if filmed by someone crouching. The camera moved slowly through the hallways, then stopped at my bedroom door. The handle jiggled and the door creaked open. My breath hitched as the video ended, frozen on a single frame. Me, lying in bed, sound asleep. My throat closed up. It wasn't possible. My house was locked. I had been alone all night. How? A sharp knock at the window made me jump, my heart slamming into my ribs. I froze, paralyzed by a wave of terror that I couldn't shake. Slowly, I turned to face the window. At first, I saw nothing, just my dim reflection in the glass. Then it shifted. Behind me, in the reflection, something moved. A shadow. It was standing there, impossibly tall, just a few feet away. I spun around, but the room was empty. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. When I turned back to the window, my reflection smiled at me. But I wasn't smiling. I screamed, hurling the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a sickening thud, but the screen stayed on, flickering like a heartbeat. Another notification chimed. Would you like to post a duet? I barely slept that night, and when I did, the nightmares were relentless. Dark hallways stretched endlessly, filled with distorted laughter and flickering glimpses of that figure. Always just out of reach, but impossibly close. I woke drenched in sweat, my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Every notification was the same, another repost, another mention of the nightmare. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something about this was far worse than a viral trend or even some deranged prank. It felt deliberate, targeted, and worst of all, personal. I started scrolling through the nightmare tag. The sheer volume of videos was staggering. Clips showed the figure in alleys, mirrors, darkened rooms, always watching, always closer than before. Some users claimed it had started following them after they engaged with the tag. Others said their accounts had been taken over entirely, their videos replaced with black screens and distorted whispers. Then I found a video from a user called Mid86. It was grainy, the audio warped, but the message was clear. If you're seeing this, you've already given it too much. Don't engage. Don't film. Don't look for it. The more attention you give, the stronger it gets. The video cut to static for a moment before returning, showing Mid86 sitting in the dark. Their face was pale, eyes sunken with fear. They leaned in close to the camera. It feeds on attention, that's how it finds you, that's how it takes you. I shivered, locking my phone and tossing it onto the bed. My heart raced as I replayed their words in my head. Was this what was happening to me? Was the algorithm itself somehow alive? It sounded insane, something straight out of a creepypasta or a bad movie. And yet it felt surreal. When I finally picked my phone back up, I noticed a string of new videos populating my FYP. Each one had the same eerie quality. Abandoned places, cryptic whispers, and always that figure. But one video stopped me cold. It wasn't just another random post. It was me. The video showed me sitting on my bed, staring into my phone. But I wasn't filming. My phone hadn't even been in my hand at that moment. The figure was there too, standing right behind me, its head tilted unnaturally. I could almost feel its cold gaze boring into me through the screen. My stomach churned as I clicked on the user who had posted it, AlgoHost. Their profile was empty, no bio, no followers, no post beyond that single video. But their username sent a chill down my spine. The algorithm. Could it actually be behind all of this? I clicked the video again, and this time something new appeared at the end. One word, scrawled in jagged white letters. Leave. That was when I noticed the location tag. It wasn't random. It wasn't even far away. The abandoned house I'd seen earlier, it was only a 20-minute drive from mine. I sat frozen, staring at the word on my screen. My chest felt tight, like a vice was slowly closing around my ribs. My phone vibrated in my hand, breaking the silence, and I almost dropped it. A notification from Blinksy. Your followers are waiting. Waiting for what? I said to myself. My stomach churned. The app had started acting on its own over the past day. Random notifications, videos playing without me tapping them. It felt like it had a will of its own, a mind that was no longer tethered to my control. I decided I needed to prove I wasn't losing it. My followers had to see this. Maybe they'd understand what was happening, or better yet, help me figure it out. With trembling hands, I opened Blinksy and hit the Go Live button. My face filled the screen, pale and gaunt under the harsh light of my desk lamp. I tried to steady my voice as the viewers trickled in, their usernames scrolling up the side. Hey guys, I started, forcing a weak smile. Something weird has been happening. I need you to tell me if you see anything strange. The chat buzzed with initial confusion. You okay, River? This is a prank, right? OMG, what's wrong? I turned the camera to face the room, slowly panning across the walls, the bed, and the window. Do you see anything? I whispered. My voice cracked, betraying my nerves. The responses came in fast, like, what's that by the door? There's something in the corner, and behind you. I spun the camera back toward myself, heart pounding. What? Where? My voice was shrill, panic seeping in. The chat erupted in chaos again, saying, It moved! Behind you, River, turn around. OMG, it's so close. I whipped around, but there was nothing. Just my dimly lit room and the faint hum of my laptop. You're messing with me, I muttered, trying to sound confident, but my voice was barely above a whisper. And then the live stream froze. The screen went black for a second before a new image replaced it. It was still me, but not in real time. The screen showed me sitting at my desk, staring blankly into the camera as if I were watching myself. My breath hitched. In the background of the live feed, the figure loomed, its head tilted, face obscured by shadow. Do you see it now? A voice rasped from my phone's speaker. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The figure moved in the live feed, stepping closer to the frozen version of me on screen. I dropped my phone, the sound of the stream cutting out as it hit the floor. But before it went dark, one final notification appeared on the screen. Your POV is mine now. The room fell silent, but the feeling of being watched grew unbearable. I didn't dare pick the phone back up. I didn't dare look behind me. I thought deleting Blinksy would be the end of it. After that horrific live stream, I uninstalled the app and turned off my phone, hoping the nightmare would fade like a bad dream. But my relief was short-lived. The silence that followed felt disturbingly quiet, empty. The next morning, I woke to find my phone buzzing on my nightstand. That was strange because I knew I'd powered it down. When I picked it up, my lock screen showed a Blinksy notification that said, New video posted by AlgoHost. My stomach sank. I was sure I deleted the app. But there it was, sitting on my home screen as if it had never left. My finger hovered over the icon, hesitant. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The app greeted me with the now familiar distortion, the feed filled with static and fleeting blurry images. And then I saw it. It was me. A video of me. Walking through the park near my house, my heart thudded. I hadn't been to the park in weeks. In the video, I wore the same clothes I was wearing in that moment. The angle shifted, as if shot from the perspective of someone following closely. Another video loaded. This time I was standing outside my favorite coffee shop, staring blankly at the window display. I hadn't gone there either. My breathing quickened as realization struck. Whoever or whatever was posting these videos had been using my likeness, my mannerisms, my life. But I wasn't the one living it. A comment appeared under the latest video. You can't hide. You're already part of me. I put the phone down, heart racing. Turning off the phone clearly wasn't enough. I needed a real solution, something drastic. I grabbed my laptop and started researching digital hauntings, viral anomalies, anything that might explain what was happening. Forums were full of desperate posts about the nightmare, each story eerily similar to mine. Users shared tales of shadowy figures, altered videos, and unshakable feelings of being watched. Most threads ended abruptly with no resolution, but one stood out. A user named Mid86 had posted cryptic advice. Going dark doesn't save you, the algorithm doesn't forget, you have to starve it of attention. They went on to describe how the entity fed on engagement, fear, and curiosity, the very things that had lured me into its grasp. I read further. Another post suggested disrupting the connection with a signal jammer, something strong enough to block the algorithm's reach. My mind raced. If I could sever its link to me, maybe I could finally break free. Later that day, I drove to an electronics store and bought a signal jammer, hands shaking the entire time. Back home, I unboxed it like it was a lifeline. I powered it on, its low hum filling the room, and waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed. A final notification flashed across the screen before glitching out entirely. You can't silence what's already inside. The words lingered before the screen went black. For the first time in days, my phone stayed quiet. But the feeling of being watched, that never left. The abandoned house loomed in front of me, a warped skeleton of wood and stone that seemed to breathe under the pale moonlight. I parked my car at the edge of the gravel driveway, its headlights cutting weakly through the dense fog. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I hesitated before glancing at the screen. The blinksy notification read, "Welcome home." Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I had come too far to stop. The entity had dragged me into this nightmare, and I needed answers, an ending. Whether I'd escape or not didn't matter anymore. I just wanted it to stop. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the cold wind. I stepped inside, floorboards groaning beneath my weight. The air smelled damp, thick with mildew and decay, and my flashlight's narrow beam barely held the darkness at bay. The interior was a frozen moment in time. Dust-covered furniture, peeling wallpaper, and the faint outlines of long-forgotten picture frames on the walls. My phone vibrated again. A new video had been uploaded to my feed. With trembling hands, I opened it. The footage was of me walking through the very room I stood in. My own flashlight beam danced across the screen, seconds ahead of reality. My breath caught as the video's perspective shifted, focusing on a door at the end of the hallway. A faint tapping sound echoed from behind it, soft, deliberate, rhythmic. I moved toward the door, my heartbeat syncing with the sound. With each step, the air grew colder, heavier. The tapping stopped as I reached out, my fingers brushing the chipped wood. The door creaked open on its own, revealing darkness that felt alive. And then something moved. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, the air damp and metallic like the breath of something waiting. My flashlight flickered as I descended the uneven wooden steps, each creak amplifying the suffocating silence. The glow from the monitors at the bottom cast eerie blue and green shadows, painting the room in sickly hues. The screens lined the walls, each playing distorted blinksies in endless loops. Familiar faces flickered across the displays, smiling, laughing, frozen in terror. I recognized some of them, creators I'd followed, users I'd seen tagged under the nightmare hashtag. They weren't just videos, they were moments stolen and corrupted. In the center of the room stood the server. It hummed with a low, droning pulse that resonated in my chest. Cables coiled around it like veins, tethering it to the monitors and the house itself. And then, from the shadows, it emerged. At first I thought it was human, but as it stepped closer I saw the truth. Its body was a grotesque patchwork of faces, each shifting and melding into one another, mouths twitching, eyes blinking in a mismatched rhythm. Its voice was a chorus, layered and broken, speaking directly to me. "You're part of the pattern now," it said. "Every click, every scroll feeds me. I am Algo Host, and you are my content." I stumbled back, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The figure didn't move closer, it didn't have to. The room itself seemed to close in, the walls pulsating with the faces of the trapped. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the monitors, distorted and looped back to me. My own face stared back from the screens, and the entity whispered, "Welcome to your new platform." The house came alive the moment I turned to run. The basement door slammed shut, and the stairs folded into themselves like a grotesque carnival trick. The air buzzed with the electric hum of the server, growing louder with each passing second. Monitors flickered wildly, displaying my face in distorted fragments. The entity's voice reverberated through the room, a chorus of overlapping whispers and screams. "You can't leave, you are part of me now." I fought to keep my composure, recalling the advice from mid-86's video. Don't engage, don't look at it, don't feed it. I turned my back on the monitors, focusing on the server in the center of the room. The cables writhed like living things, snaking toward my feet. The house began to shift. Walls rippled as if breathing, the room elongating and twisting. Doors appeared only to vanish the moment I reached for them. My pulse hammered as I dodged cables and ducked under low-hanging beams. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to mock my every move. "You can't escape," the entity taunted. "Every step you take is mine to control." I gritted my teeth, refusing to meet its gaze on the screens. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a cruel reminder of its reach. Pulling it out, I stared at the Blinksy app. It had opened itself again, a live feed showing the basement from the entity's point of view. Desperate, I remembered the signal jammer tucked in my bag, a precaution I'd brought in case things went too far. Fumbling with shaking hands, I activated it. The hum of the server faltered, the monitors glitched, and the cables froze mid-slither. The entity's voice cracked, a distorted shriek echoing through the collapsing room. "You'll never be free," it screamed as I scrambled for the nearest exit, the house crumbling around me. The house groaned, and its walls buckled under the weight of its collapsing reality. My fingers clenched around the signal jammer, the device trembling as if it, too, fought against the entity's influence. Each step I took toward the server felt like walking through tar, the air thick with static and distorted screams. "You can't end this!" the entity bellowed, its voice shattering into fragments. "I am endless, I am you." I didn't dare look at the monitors, though I could feel the weight of my own distorted reflection on every screen. The cables writhed again, weaker this time, but still reaching for me like dying tendrils. I tore one off my ankle and stumbled toward the server. Memories of mid-86's warning flooded my mind. It feeds on your fear, on your attention. Starve it. My breathing steadied as I realized the truth. I couldn't let it control me anymore. I gripped the jammer tighter, its low buzz disrupting the digital haze around me. "I'm done playing your game," I said, my voice firm despite the chaos. With one final burst of energy, I shoved the jammer into the server, forcing it into the whirring machinery. Sparks flew, and the monitors erupted into static. The entity's screams turned guttural, a cacophony of rage and desperation. The room began to collapse entirely, walls disintegrating into digital fragments. A wave of energy surged through me, like static electricity snapping against my skin. For a moment, I felt weightless, disconnected, as if my very consciousness had been untethered. Then silence. The house crumbled into nothingness, leaving me sprawled on the cold ground outside. My phone buzzed one last time, the Blinksy app flashing a simple message: "Connection lost." I staggered into the cold night, the remnants of the house gone as if it had never existed. My chest heaved with exhaustion, and the weight of silence pressed down on me. It felt alien after the chaos, the absence of the entity's voice almost too quiet. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I froze. With shaking hands, I pulled it out. A single notification glowed on the cracked screen. "You're free, for now." The word sent a chill racing down my spine, but I dismissed it and stared at the Blinksy app. Against every instinct screaming at me, I opened it. The FYP was normal. Dance trends, pet videos, bad lip syncing, all the mundane noise I once loved. But something was not right. Every time I scrolled, my reflection in the black frame of the screen seemed just a little off. My smile lingered. My eyes followed me, even when I looked away. I deleted the app without a second thought, my thumb hovering over the icon until it vanished. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting. At home, I tossed the phone on my desk and stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. I couldn't tell if it was exhaustion or something more sinister, but my reflection didn't seem to move in sync with me. My mouth twitched into a sharp grin. A faint whisper echoed from the speaker, so soft it was almost imperceptible. "The pattern grows." I flung the phone across the room, and it landed with a dull thud. Its screen remained black, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, deep in the code, the entity was waiting, watching. I don't scroll anymore, but every time I see my reflection, I wonder if the algorithm still has me. Their home was bigger than any of us expected. Lucas didn't talk about his family much since moving. He mentioned once they were geologists or biologists, an ist of some kind. We didn't expect wealth or opulence. He had been giving me handwritten notes and printed out pamphlets for a few weeks, speaking of the end times and religious ramblings. My family gathered around to read them each time. My father said he ran into the parents one day after school and accepted an invitation to go over for a day. We were shocked, but he said they were lovely, normal even, and he was also a bit curious. My father made an offhanded joke about them as we pulled up. My mother reflexively slapped his shoulder with the back of her hand, looking up from her phone and waving to the family standing on the front porch. "They're just different. Be open," she said. Trotting down the front stairs towards us, Ms. Collier pulled me into a hug so tight I thought my head would pop off. I didn't hear her first name. Ms. Collier it was. His father, Mr. Collier, was the opposite. He waved loosely from the porch. He might not have even waved, just watched from the doorway before retreating back inside. Ms. Collier brushed it off. "He's just quiet," she stressed. My mother said something about how much of a hike to school it must be for them, living this far out. The house was impressive, if sterile and cold. Like walking through the halls of a museum, it was like a holiday house, the bare essentials. Their lives seemed as empty as the home, not talking about themselves or their work much. I could tell this was going to be a one and done with this family. My parents went off with the Colliers to see the house, leaving my sister and I standing silently with Lucas. She scurried off, setting up on a couch somewhere with her headphones in. Lucas and I stood in the silence for a moment too long. He didn't say anything but gestured for me to follow him. Passing a row of framed portraits above the fireplace, I asked who they were. He ignored me till I asked again a bit louder. He said he didn't know. I couldn't wait to leave. I couldn't imagine what this boy did outside of school. I tried hard to picture him having fun with his family, playing video games, sneaking a cigarette. I couldn't. Just a void. Just alone in a void until required to go out in the world. In his bedroom being a stretch, kept with the rest of the house, there were no pictures or toys or anything showing a young boy lived here. He said they hadn't gotten around to unpacking all his things since the move. I had a hard time believing him. Still early in the day, I watched in relative silence alongside my sister and Lucas as our parents drilled through every interest of theirs to try and find common ground. My parents owned a fish and chip shop off the beach. Neither were prepared to connect with two scientists and their beliefs. Ms. Collier poured a round of drinks, to loosen everyone up maybe, and put the glass bottle back into the oddly empty fridge. She brought my sister and me a glass. She told us she didn't mind, and wouldn't tell our parents. My sister downed the glass straight away. I followed her lead. Over the day, Miss Collier fed us glass after glass as I dodged any interaction with her son. Later I stumbled, breaking a glass. My mother joked that I'd had too much. Did she know? It felt like a joke. I got a brief moment with my parents, huddling to talk. My dad joked, mentioning he was going on a hunt to figure out who these people were, joking about a dungeon or something. Fading in and out of focus, sipping at my glass, I watched Mr. Collier lectured incessantly as Ms. Collier chimed in from time to time in an attempt to simplify him. Even in my state, my mind wandering off out of the room again and again, I could pick the strain and awkwardness on my parents' faces, nodding away. Mr. Collier began to get boisterous, louder, getting onto his feet again and again. I watched him trip, landing a heavy hand on my father's chair to steady himself, but bringing both to the ground. My father's wrist was tangled under the chair leg, twisted at a grotesque angle. We all crowded around, looking between each other, unsure what to do. My father assured everyone he was fine, but Mr. Collier eventually convinced everyone he would drive my father to the hospital. He was sober, and had been since the 90s, he bragged. We spent the afternoon by the pool, a bit shocked and a bit drunk. I took my phone out to take a photo of the mountain range. Through the house, I could see my mother and Miss Collier floating between rooms, looking like they were almost yelling. They could be laughing maybe, hands flying about. Before I could press the button, I was underwater. It took a few moments to get myself up for air, the alcohol tearing away my coordination. Wiping my eyes, I saw Lucas standing at the edge. This asshole had shoulder charged me into the pool. As a joke? He had a grin forced. I pulled myself out and pulled off my wet clothes. Miss Collier appeared at the door without my mother. She scolded Lucas, who stormed off. My phone was soaked through, rapidly clicking the button, showing nothing but black. Miss Collier was chuckling, downplaying the situation. She asked my sister to help her find some towels while I pulled myself up out of the water. The sun felt sharper, hotter than before. I hadn't eaten or drank water in hours, my guts feeling twisted in a knot. I waddled on wet, shaky legs towards the house, the back door drifting to the corners of my vision again and again. Behind some empty containers in the pantry, I found a small bag of rice. I took a small tub, filled it with rice, and threw my phone in. The house was quiet. I held the tub under my arm. Standing still, I focused as hard as I could to still my heart. I tiptoed around the house, steadying myself against the cool walls. I remember wandering towards Lucas's bedroom. I found him with head in his hands. I chuckled. Why did I do that? I was still buzzed, cupping my hand over my mouth. He looked up, eyes red. I dropped down on his bed. We talked for a bit. He talked to me for a bit, and I tried as hard as I could to keep both my eyes open and blinking together. I took in every couple of words, but I could see he was serious. Without me realizing, he was standing up next to the bed, looked down at me. He asked if I believed. I threw up in my mouth a bit, the acid stinging my throat. Believe what? He'd been talking about the notes he had been giving me for weeks. I laughed, still a bit buzzed, accidentally telling him how we read and joked about them around the dinner table. I had to believe, he said. I was getting hot. I could feel my face getting red. He lunged forward and grabbed my shirt, pulling me up off the bed. Spit flying in my face, he was yelling at me now, that I was chosen and I would see. His words floating in my head, mixing with the alcohol, blurring it all together. I chuckled again. I didn't believe what was happening. This must be another terrible joke of his. He lunged at me again. The sober part of my brain, wherever it was working away, yanked the digital clock up off the side table across the side of his head, ripping the power cord out of the wall. He went down, mostly from the shock. As he steadied himself on his forearm, I threw the clock at him hard. I always played wicket-keeper in cricket because my aim throwing was bad, sometimes dangerous. I had nailed it this time, the corner of the clock striking his forehead clean, sending him flying back to the ground, a spatter of blood fountaining up and across the white bedroom wall. I leapt over him, landing unsteady but upright, and out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I found Mr. Collier in the cupboard, feet sticking out of the doorway. I cleared my throat and he jolted up, knocking his head against a shelf. He was back? I didn't hear them come in. My father was in hospital getting fixed up. He will get a lift back later from a doctor friend of his, Mr. Collier told me. Nothing to worry about. He brushed some rice off his hands as he stood up. He said my mother was having a lay-down, just a rest before dinner. He asked where Lucas was. I didn't answer and stumbled to the bathroom. I heard him ask louder from the hallway, but I was gone. Slamming the door shut, I closed the toilet seat lid, stood on the tips of my toes and pushed in the light fixture. Sliding the ends of my fingers into the hole, I pulled at the corner of a box and slid it out. Falling into the hands, I pulled my phone out of the box of rice. I held down the power button. The screen lit up. I let out a heavy breath of relief. I pushed through the bathroom window and crawled out. In the backyard, I found my mother's number and pressed the call button. It rang, not disconnected. No answer either. After it rang out, I scrolled and found my father's. It rang as well. I could hear the ringing. I could hear the buzz of the vibration. Could I hear it? I could feel it. I lifted each of my feet up off the grass. I could feel it through the dirt. I slowly got down onto all fours. My phone is still ringing in my hand. I pressed my head slowly down onto the grass. The vibration now shook my ear. I could hear it vibrating up through the dirt. Miss Collier's voice echoed out from the back door. Silhouetted against the house lights, she asked me to come inside. Once calmly. When I didn't move, she raised her voice. I looked back out towards the range. The hills rolled off towards civilization. There's no way I could run that far. I turned and walked towards the back of the house. It was quiet inside. The lights were off, only the shine of the living room light creeping around the house. I walked slowly, Miss Collier's hand on my shoulder guiding me towards the light. The living room was a mess. The dining table was dragged to the window and there was glass on the floor. I saw my sister. She was sitting in a dining chair in the middle of the room. She looked asleep, but she was moving. I could see her wrists struggling against something. A rope? Mr. Collier appeared at my shoulder. He had his hand gripped tight. I could feel my collarbone bend under his grip. He could snap it clean if he tried. Lucas arrived next to me, wincing. Miss Collier walked back in the room, snapped on a pair of latex gloves, and pulled a nauseating-looking syringe out of a small wooden box. The vial was filled with a thick black liquid. My sister struggled as she rolled her sleeve up past her elbow. Mr. Collier let go of my shoulder and came over to hold her forearm still with his weight. Lucas stepped up next to me. I could see he had a small steak knife in his hand. A dark black ring had grown around his eye. Miss Collier slowly pierced the metal needle into a pulsing vein right beneath her bicep. She drew a bit of blood mixing with the liquid, turning it a deep crimson. She slowly pushed the end of the syringe down, pushing the liquid into her arm. They both stepped back. It was silent for what felt like hours. When she snapped her chest up violently, my sister managed to break the wooden back frame of the chair. Mr. Collier rushed back over with his son to hold her down. She eventually stopped, head dropping low in her chest. Ms. Collier threw the syringe and gloves down hard onto the table in disappointment. Mr. Collier let out a long sigh. He took a moment, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and turned towards me. Lucas wrapped his forearm around my throat and pulled me backwards. I was immediately off balance, no footing to push or fight back. He dragged me down as the two adults rushed over and helped pull me over to the other intact dining chair. They tied each of my limbs to the chair, unable to put up much of a fight. She whispered in my ear as she tied my arms down, hoping I could be their vessel. They'd hoped my sister would be the one to carry their voice. She explained her son had liked me, that he needed a friend on the other side. Stroking the back of my head, she told me to have no fear, they come in peace. She held the tip of the needle close to my skin. The end started to shake. Was she nervous? My chair was shaking, the whole room seemed to be shaking. They both leaned back. I watched the picture frames above the fireplace drop, one by one, onto the hard floor. A bright blue light flooded in the windows, lighting up the room. Plates flew off the dining table, shattering. I saw Miss Collier's eyes widen. She whispered something to her husband. I couldn't make it out clearly. It sounded like she said they were early. He looked perplexed, not stunned from a sudden earthquake, but like this wasn't happening how he expected it to. I could hear the walls and windows fighting to stay upright. Then we all heard the muffled screams. Turning around, I saw my sister in the doorway. She stood still against the shaking walls. She was taking long, painful-looking breaths. Letting go of his neck, Lucas dropped in a heap at her feet. His eyes winced, but the ability to move or speak had been broken. Mr. Collier stood up and in one motion rushed towards her with his hands raised. Paternal instinct. I watched them scuffle. Even at half his height and weight, she put up a loose but even fight. I saw her arm snap under his weight. I saw his shock as she kept moving, swinging the arm like a mace. No pain or fear. I saw her eyes then. Black. Glassy. She dug her teeth hard into his arm, tearing a chunk off and spitting it out. He pulled back, just enough of an opening for her to grab a shard off a broken plate that had fallen and ram it hard up beneath his jaw. The force must have scrambled something inside because I watched one of his eyes bulge out of its socket. They both looked off in different directions. His face was a grimace. She slid the shard back out and he toppled back into a side table. She turned to Miss Collier and me, still strapped to the chair. I could see the tears run down the mother's cheeks, but her face didn't change. She started to hobble forward towards my sister, slowly getting down on all fours. When she reached my sister, she was nearly flat on the ground, head down and arms outstretched. Groveling. I couldn't hear what she was saying. My sister knelt down to her level. She put a hand under the mother's chin and lifted her head up to meet her gaze. They stared at each other for a moment. There is nothing here for us. This planet is poisoned, the water, the soil, you have lied. It was my sister's voice, but she sounded like she had never spoken before. Like she was forcing her throat and face muscles together for the first time. It was guttural. Filthy. I finally heard the mother. I could hear her pleading about something, saying she could fix it, that she believed. My sister had her hand wrapped around her throat now, tightening. Over the struggling breaths, I could hear Ms. Collier clearer. Apologizing had turned to begging. Eventually, she stopped. I heard a crack like stepping on a branch. The mother dropped down back into her groveling heap. Standing up, my sister looked at me again. She slowly walked over. Leaning down, I saw into her eyes. Nothing. All I saw was myself staring back. I finally saw how I looked. I have never seen that face before. I looked empty, drained of all fear. She placed the point of the plate shard against my neck. Slowly, she dragged it down my neck, over my shoulder, and down my arm. Without taking her eyes off me, she slid the shard under the restraint and cut them open. She dropped the shard. Staring at me, the black of her eyes faded. It wasn't my sister's eyes looking back. No blue or green, just a wash of gray. She wasn't there. Nothing was there. She stood upright, her legs gave way, and she crashed backwards onto the ground. Pulling myself out of the chair, feeling full of cement, I rubbed my wrists and looked around. I stumbled to the front door. Beyond the trees, I could see a pair of headlights coming towards the house. I sat down on the front steps and closed my eyes.